Hiya. You've probably seen the runtime of this video. I haven't because I'm recording it. But this is most likely the longest video that I have ever made. Probably also the longest video I will ever make. And it is the most in-depth Assassination Rogue guide you probably will ever see. We of course have the Maple story in the background. Now, before we start, I want this to be like an end of the War Within, like not only a Season 3 guide, but something you can reference, something you can send to new rogues, something that you can use yourself to refresh yourself going into midnight. And I want this to be the singular, most in-depth thing that you will ever see. For new players who've never touched Rogue, for experienced rogues that need information for Season 3, everything will be in here, everything will be timestamped. I am aware that this video will be forever. Please use the timestamps below to go to the sections that you're interested in. We're in for a road. A long, long road. I have actual water, so you know I'm taking this seriously. Right off the bat, if you've never played Assassination and you've never played Rogue, hiya. I'm Whisper. If you don't know who I am, I'm the funny looking dude that does this thing. I'm also the funny looking rogue that does this thing. I do both method and Wowhead guides for Assassination. I have been a community figure and moderator in the Ravenholt Rogue Discord since roughly Nyalotha, so 4 expansions almost at this point. It's been a long ride. I've also been a contributor in Simulation Craft. I'm the person updating all of the Assassination APL. I'm the one submitting the profiles, fixing trinket stuff, Season 2, Season stuff. I've been doing this all the way since 2021. There's some stuff missing here, but I've been contributing to Simulation Craft. I write all the guides. I'm the theory crafter. If you open the pins in Assassination, that's probably also me. But I am not the only person that does things, and I don't want to take all of the credit for this. So, I'm actually going to shout out some people that I think are very helpful and that have helped me in my journey. First of all, Shindig. This might be a strange one. Shindig's new on the scene, but his perspectives on M+ and his guides have been very helpful. I think he explains things incredibly well, so if you don't like my rambly style, Shindig, he's a good dude, he's a good lad, plays very well. We do have some differences on stuff, and Shindig, I know you're watching. I got a bone to pick with you about Sims, buddy. Not really, but whatever. Next on my list to go through, we have the Assassination Rogue Guide from Icy Veins by Selly. Selly has been a longtime friend of mine, friend of the Assassination community. Doesn't play as much as he used to, but during like Legion, BFA, and all that stuff, this guy was the GOAT. Big fan of this guy. He knows what he's talking about. Great player. Long-time Assassination enjoyer. He is a great help, both being there emotionally for me, as well as bouncing ideas off of. And then I'm going to link 2 sub-guides. The Subtlety Guide on Icy Veins by Aleem. Aleem is a great player. He raids in a top 100 guild. He pushes M+. He is a really, really good source of information. He's amazing, and he has helped me so much with Assassination simulations. I cannot thank this guy enough. Last but not least, I also want to thank Stealthy. Stealthy is also at a high-end guild. World rank 50, he has been for a long time. He's also 3-day rating top 50, which is crazy. He doesn't do as much M+, but he's still been a great source of information, great source of help, bouncing ideas off of just being there. He's also a moderator in the Ravenholt Discord. You might see him around in Subtlety. Great people. The last person I want to shout out is Fu. I might be at odds with his spreadsheet at times, and I might disagree with a lot of things he says. We've butted heads more than a couple times. However, Fu is one of the biggest driving forces of positivity in the rogue community that I know of, and his information, top-notch. He visualizes stuff, he puts out the spreadsheet that you probably all see, he makes sure that everyone has information that is up to date, and he tries his best. And honestly, he's a great dude. Nothing wrong about him. Even though, you know, we have our differences in opinions. Shout out that guy. He does the Wowhead sub-guide. Great dude. So, without further ado, by God, Shindig, I'm stealing your setup, buddy. Welcome to Spreadsheet. And by Spreadsheet, I mean Slideshow. Whatever this is. This is mostly to keep me organized. Not even for you guys. I'm gonna be honest. I have ADHD like hell, and I cannot focus on a video if it's gonna be 3 hours long and I need to do all of this. So, welcome to Assassination for Season 3. Again, this is Season 3 only, and even though I want you to use this for like going into midnight and stuff, don't use this in 2038. Some of the stuff that I say can and will change. It is inevitable. Change will happen. It's just how the game works. So, here are our topics. Before we start, I have several mental issues. If I say things that are deranged, just deal with it. That's what I am. We're going to go through it, raw basics. If you've never played Rogue before, get you up to speed, do a TLDR rotation, how the talents interact. Then we're going to talk about some raid stuff, some Mythic Plus stuff, talk about a bunch of min-max stuff, gear, and why I hate you specifically for the gear choices that you make, and how I recommend simming, because I am, after all, the sim guy, apparently. Going to talk specifically about Fatebound and Deathstalker, and then we're going to talk about my UI, how to edit, what it tracks, why it tracks it, what it does, etc., etc., etc. Okay. The last note I want to do before we get really, really deep into it is send more monsters. Unsponsored water is what keeps me going at night. So, what is Assassination? I'm going to be using the game. I'm going to be flip-flopping between the game and this. So, first of all, you need to know Assassination is a generator spender spec. So you generate combo points through a variety of means, mostly Mutilate and Fan of Knives. And then you're going to be using them on finishers, either Rupture, Envenom, Crimson Tempest. Those are your big three. And finishers, they do a big amount of damage. They are how you spend your combo points. You're going to be constantly in a cycle of building combo points, using them, building them, using them, building them, using them. That is it. There are some keywords to know, like bleeds, poisons, and then you have a couple of cooldowns, mostly from stealth. Then you have Deathmark, and you have Kingsbane. Deathmark is your big 2-minute cooldown. Kingsbane is your 1-minute cooldown. And then you have a short cooldown, which ties everything together, called Shiv. Shiv is a big part of the spec. It is the glue that holds the entire thing together. And then you have some utility spells, of course. You have your movement speed stuff. You have your mobility spells. You have your defensives. So let's hop into game. Let's take a look at what we have. Okay. So, right off the bat, general rogue things. We have Ambush. This is just a combo point generator. You can only use it from stealth. The recommendation here is that you put it on your stealth bar. When you press your stealth button, your bottom row of abilities changes into a stealth version. Put Ambush where you put your Mutilate. So for me, on my 1 key, out of stealth, Mutilate, in stealth, Ambush. Solves all problems, never need to worry about it again. Then you have Slice and Dice. This is a finisher. We don't cast this, however, because there is a passive that casts this for us, so we can ignore it entirely. Then we have some generic things I'm just going to fly over. So, Kick. This is your interrupt. You have a stun finisher. This is Kidney Shot. It's situationally used in Mythic Plus, for example. It doesn't do any damage, it simply stuns. So this is just stun button, single target. You have Blind. This is Disorient. We will always be taking a talent that makes this AoE. So this is an AoE stop. But obviously, because it is a Disorient, once they take damage, the Disorient wears off they start walking around again. Then you have some niche stuff. Pick, lock, this is just a flavor thing. Pickpocket is just a flavor thing. Detection is a flavor thing. You have distract. This is sometimes useful in Mythic Plus to stop packs from wandering around. But in general, this is a very niche use. If you don't know exactly how it works, what happens is you get this circle. And if there's mobs walking through this circle, say from here over to the left, you can place the circle down. And it's going to make the mobs turn towards it and stop walking for a couple seconds. So you see this dummy turned here, and then once the effect wears off, it's going to turn back towards me. Like that. This has a cooldown, but again, very niche. Then you have some mobility stuff. So you have sprint here. This is just a movement speed increase. You can use it while stealthed. It is a run fast ability. That is all that does. Shroud of Concealments, this is a classic for rogues. You shroud everyone in stealth in this area. This is used for M+ skips. Then you have Sap. This is a incapacitate. So the way this works is you can sap a mob, and it will have a lower aggro range. You can run past it. This is also used in M+ skips sometimes. And then you have some defensives. So you have, for example, evasion here. This increases your dodge chance. This is not a physical immunity. This is a dodge chance towards attacks. We will, however, be augmenting this with talent later on to make it more powerful. So baseline, this doesn't do much, but it can cheese some mechanics sometimes in Mythic Plus. But it'll get stronger later once we build talents on top of it. Cloak of Shadows, this is a magic immunity. However, there are two parts to this. There is a super immunity, and then a secondary immunity. It's very strange how this works, but it says provides a moment of magic immunity. That is a 1 second window that removes and negates basically everything in the game that does magic damage. And then the cloak lingers, causing you to resist harmful spells. That's the secondary part. There have been situations in the past where there's mechanics that are only immunable in that 1-second window. So in that situation, you know, you gotta make sure that that's that 1 second. Usually this is just something that you know about intuitively as you play the game, or if there's niche situations, you can show up in the Rogue Discord and ask. People generally know, but it hasn't been a thing in the last like 3 seasons, so it's very rare that that 1 second matters. Then you have Fate. This reduces area of effect attacks by 40%. This is your main defensive. It is very, very strong. You can modify this to be stronger with talents as well. Most everything these days is kind of an AoE unless it's a targeted spell. So like if there's a mob that's shooting you with a cannon, or like an attack, like an auto attack, usually those are targeted. Otherwise, you know, things like a charge, that's an AoE. A stomp, that's an AoE. Any sort of cleave is an AoE. Like if they swing their axe in a frontal circle, that's an AoE. So this works on pretty much like 80% of the game, and it's very, very powerful. When in doubt, always hit feints. This is also off the GCD, so panic hitting this is kind of fine. We like panic hitting it. Aside from that, we have Vanish. This is our first cooldown that we need to talk about. This enables stealth effects, and it has a 2-minute cooldown. Stealth effects will come into play later. For now, we don't need to worry about it. The only thing right now that we need to worry about is that Ambush is used for our hero talent. That's why we have it on our stealth bar like this. Okay, last thing. For all rogues, but especially for Assassination, you have this poison window. You can put this on an action bar somewhere like here, and it'll just fly out. I have it up here. There are 2 types of poisons that you need to keep in mind. There are lethals, the ones that do damage, and non-lethals, the ones that don't do damage. I have a write-up about this on the Wowhead guide, as I do with most information that I'll be covering here. So if you ever need to read up on it, open the Wowhead guide, so go for there. For Assassination specifically, you will have access to 4 poisons. 4 lethals, and you will have access to 3 non-lethals, but you can only use 2 of them, and one of them is a choice node talent. So your 4 lethal poisons. Instant poison, this is the baseline. You can think of this as just standard poison. You have wound poison, which does half the damage of instant poison, right? This is the base. So half of base damage, but it reduces all healing and it stacks. So this is sometimes useful on raid bosses that heal. You can use this on the Yes Men in Cinderbrew as well. That's a thing where that works sometimes. Then you have deadly poison. This does the same damage as instant poison, but it also has a dot, and it makes this a debuff, which is an important difference. So additional dot damage and a debuff, both very good. Then you have amplifying poison. This is again the same instant damage, the same base. However, you also get a debuff, and it increases your Envenom damage. Envenom is your main filler finisher spell, so this is a powerful, powerful effect. Then for your non-lethals, you have Crippling Poison. This is just a slow, but it is a debuff, which is again important. You have Atrophic Poison. This is a 3% damage reduction. With a talent, it goes up to 3.6%. And this is a reduction from that target on everyone in your party. So if you have a boss that does a big slam attack, for example, and everyone gets hit by it, it's a spread mechanic, everyone takes 3.6% less damage. This does stack with other rogues. I'm not sure why. They tried to fix it at one point. It was fixed for about a week, and then they broke it again. So maybe it's intended. But it does stack. It stacks multiplicatively. So the first rogue reduces it by 3.6%. Then you take the reduced chunk. The second rogue reduces it by 3.6%. Chunk gets smaller. Next rogue reduces by 3.6%. The chunk gets smaller. Next rogue reduces it, right? So on and so forth. The last one is over here with the choice node. This is where you get Atrophic. You also have Numbing Poison. This is a undervalued talent, especially in Mythic Plus. In Mythic Plus, this is an insanely strong tank damage reduction. So if your tank is taking a lot of damage, Numbing Poison is ridiculous. 18% attack and cast speed slow is a lot of reduction and a lot of mitigation for your tank. They simply just take less autos. It's 100% reduction because they're just taking less autos. This also can come into effect with some bosses. For example, there used to be a boss in Nathria, for people who remember, called Sludge Fist, who had very slow but very hard-hitting autos. Numbing Poison and Curse of Tongues attack slowing effects are very powerful on stuff like that because they can change the boss's attack pattern and basically cancel additional autos because they then wind up to cast spells and stuff. So situationally, Numbing Poison is really good. This does stack with Curse of Tongues from Warlocks, so it's very strong. The cast speed, for example, has been used previously in Season 2 on One-Armed Bandit to increase the cast time on the ads. So do not undervalue Numbing Poison. Numbing Poison is sleeper. A lot of people don't take this, but they kind of really should, especially in lower keys, because making your tank much tankier is a great thing. And 3.6% won't save you most of the time unless you're doing like giga high keys. So keep that in mind, but those are your two options. Okay, then if we go back and we look, right, we covered some of the utility stuff, we covered some of the poisons, we went over some of the finishers already, some of the generators. So let's go down this list and flesh out the rest of the spec. So we have generates combo points. In terms of combo point generators, there is nothing that you can talent here that changes the baseline effect. There is, however, Kingsbane, which is a cooldown and generates a combo point, but we do not care about one singular combo point like this. This is mainly used for the cooldown part. Okay, so baseline for Rogue then. What do we have on Assassination side? Shadow Step just puts you behind the target. This is a mobility thing. However, we get a new spell called Mutilate. Mutilate is your main generator. This is your main generator in single target and low target cleave. And this shares a spot with Ambush. The notable thing is that it attacks with both weapons, which will come into play in a little bit when I explain a combo point related talent. Then you have Fan of Knives. This is an AoE generator. You will use this again in AoE. And it doesn't really deal a lot of damage on its own, but there are some situations where it does deal a lot of damage. That is hero talent related. So, in general, if you're in single target, hit Mutilate. If you're in AoE, hit Fan of Knives, and you'll get some combo points, and you can spend them. The main thing you're spending it on is Rupture, Crimson Tempest, and Envenom. Rupture and Crimson Tempest are what we call bleeds. These are damage over time effects. They last a certain amount of time. As you can see, it lasts longer per combo points, but the damage also goes up. This is linear, and this is true for all finishers. All finishers do the same damage per combo point. So it goes up 1 combo point, does half the damage of 2 combo points, right? So this damage is completely equal per combo points. The only thing you get is more efficient energy because the energy is constant, right? The energy cost is the same, but the damage per tick stays equal. The duration goes up on these. You'll want to be maintaining these in most situations. Rupture is maintained on multiple targets all the time. This is your main thing that you always need to keep up. Crimson Tempest is an AoE finisher that you use in AoE situations. Other than that, Mutilate into Envenom is sort of your main combo. Envenom is your main spell that you will be casting all the time as a finisher. And this is just where you dump all of your combo points if you don't have anywhere to dump them to with bleeds. This also increases your poison application chance as a buff. This used to be a lot more impressive, and we'd have to play around this. These days, there's no real rotational impact to the buff. It just kind of exists. And while there are some minor optimizations that you can do around it, most of them are not really worth it, and you don't really have to think about this buff. Now, we do still track them. That's what this green stuff is in the middle, but you don't have to worry about it too much. The last thing which generates combo points is my good friend Poisoned Knife. I tell people to take this off of their bars. I am a big advocate of not having this on your bars. I'm a hypocrite, however, because I have it on my bars. Do I ever press it? Not really. The reason why you don't want to press Poison Knife is this costs an insane amount of energy, and it does legitimately like 1/9 of the damage of a Mutilate. It costs roughly the same amount of energy, and it generates half the combo points. So you get way less combo points, way less damage, and it costs the same amount of energy, which is a huge issue. That sucks real bad. There is a situation where you would use it, however. The situation where you would use it is if you are not able to attack anything and you are going to cap on energy. Both of those need to be true. Just because you're off a boss does not mean you use Poison Knife. Just because you're full energy doesn't mean you use Poison Knife. They have to both be true. So, for example, I'm just going to hit this thing, use some energy. So let's say I use a bunch of energy, and now I'm like, ah, crap, need to run off the boss. I run off the boss. I'm not full energy, so I'm going to sit here and I'm going to wait. I'm still not full energy. I am still not full energy. I am still not full energy. Only now would I press Poisoned Knife to get an additional combo point. That is the single situation where you would use Poison Knife. Otherwise, it is a waste of energy, and it is simply not worth your time. Because in this time where you had all of your energy spent, right? Let's say you spend all your energy, you're like, oh, I need to run out for a boss mechanic. You press Envenom, you go, oh, okay, time to run out for a boss mechanic. You're regenning, but you're not capping energy. This energy you can use when you get back to the boss. You don't have to throw Poison Knife here. And I see rogues, especially new ones, do this all the time. They feel like, oh, I'm not hitting a button. I'm standing out here, I'm not hitting a button. You're fine. You have 300 max energy. I didn't overcap any of my energy doing that. I was out there for like a year. I did not overcap energy. It's not an issue. Just let your energy refill. As long as you're not overcapping, it will be fine. Okay? So that is my PSA about Poison Knife. Finisher-wise, we already covered it a little bit. Envenom, Crimson Tempest, Rupture, those are your 3. And then cut to the chase. This is what gives Slice and Dice, so that we don't have to cast it manually. Okay. Very important passive about generating combo points. There is a talent, you will always take this. It's called Seal Fate. Critical strikes with attacks that generate combo points grant an additional combo point per critical strike. Now, the important part here is per critical strike. Remember how I said mutilate attacks with both weapons? That means that if I crit both hands, I will get 4. So here, 1 hand crit. No hand crit, right? I'm getting 2. No crit there. Again, no crit. This is kind of okay. This is not going the way I expected it to. But believe me, you can get 4 combo points if both hands crit. The same thing is true about Fan of Knives. This awards 1 combo point, however, each enemy you crit will grant another one. So hopefully, if it wants to cooperate this time, I Fan of Knives, I get 2 combo points because one of them crit. Fan of Knives again, I only get 1 because none of them crit. That time I got 2. I dump my combo points again. That one gave me 3, that one gave me 2. And so this is kind of the RNG that goes around with Assassination. More targets means more combo points, obviously, but more crit also means more combo points. I'm in the testing set, so don't mind any of this. But essentially, that is what's going on. You crit multiple targets with your Fan of Knives, you get more combo points. You crit both hands on your Mutilate, you get more combo points. Ambush gives a baseline of 2, 1 additional with this talent. And again, if it crits, it could give you, in this case, it didn't, so it gave me 3, but it could give you 4. That's the gamble that you play when you play Assassination. Okay. With that out of the way, when do you want to press finishers? Crimson Tempest, there is a very important text on Crimson Tempest that says, deals extra damage when multiple enemies are inflicted, increasing by 20% per target up to 100%. What does that mean? If you Crimson Tempest 1 target, this bonus is 0, because multiple targets are not afflicted. The moment you hit 2 targets with Crimson Tempest is doing 40% more damage, 20% per target, so 40% more damage on each one of those targets. Okay? It's very strong. You want to keep this up on 2 targets whenever you're talented into it. You want to do this always. It is so strong. 2 targets, incredible. It's also a prio damage increase if you're casting it on 2 targets. That is important to note. So on 2 targets, when you cast this, it is also a single target increase, not just an AoE increase or an overall increase. This button is very, very good. Next thing is Rupture. There is a lot of things attached to Rupture, so I'm going to go over them separately before we even go over all the talents, because Rupture is a bloated button with a lot to go on. The first thing Rupture does is it gives you energy back. This is via a talent called Venomous Wounds. We'll go over that a little bit later when we talk about energy-related stuff and some of the other, things, and go over the talent page. But just know Rupture equals energy. The second thing it does is Bone Spike. If you Rupture and you get combo points back, this is what's doing it. Bone Spike is a 30-second cooldown, technically. It stacks. It doesn't do a lot of damage, but it does a little bit. It's a debuff. It's a bleed debuff, and it grants a combo points plus additional combo points per active Bone Spike. So the more Bone Spikes you have out, the more combo points you get back. And so Rupture, combo point, happy, good. The other thing that Rupture does, we're not done. Scent of Blood. This is a powerful AoE tool that we have, where each enemy afflicted by a Rupture increases agility by 2% up to 20%. With 4 points in this talent, or 2 points in this talent, it'd be 4% up to 20%. So in general, if you see recommendations of like, oh, keep Rupture up on 5 targets in AoE, this is why. Scent of Blood is a powerful AoE tool. Okay. That's all the things that is attached to Rupture. So you get combo points back sometimes when you cast it. You get energy back because you're casting it, and you're getting a big buff. Then you're getting another debuff with Deathstalker, but it's just extra tick damage. There's a lot of things attached to Rupture, but those are kind of the things. You get a little bit of combo point back, bunch of energy, big buff. Okay. Aside from that, Envenom, again, increases your application chance of poisons. Not much to it. That's all it does. Instant damage, application chance, good to go. And Crimson Tempest is your AoE. Those are your finishers. That's what you press. It's fairly straightforward, actually. You have 2 generators, and you have 2 bleeds, and a dump, which is Envenom. So, now that we have kind of the bare minimum of Assassination, let's talk about some other things. Again, long video, my apologies, but I want to be as thorough as possible so that everyone understands. We need to talk about some other things. Garrote. This is a combo point generator, which you don't care about in terms of generating combo points. This is a bleed you keep up. And so this plus Rupture should be on your main target at all times. So right now, you're going to maintain Garrote. You're going to maintain Rupture, and you're going to generate and then dump into Envenom. I have it color-coded on my Weakauras here. 5 or more combo points, you finish. 4 or less, you don't. That is just a standard rule. Now, you see it glowing. You see bleeds glowing. If you've never played a damage over time spec, you might be confused why this is glowing, right? Why is this glowing now? There is something called Pandemic in the game. This works on most debuffs, sometimes also buffs on your character, and especially damage over time effects. What it does is it transfers duration from the dot you had applied to the new dots that you are applying. So if I Rupture right now, with 7 combo points, you'll see it's a 44 second, but it doesn't go to 44 seconds, it only goes to 32. It transferred the duration, some of the duration, from the old dot onto the new dot. This is in order to prevent the issue of having to refresh at exactly 0. It gives you a little bit of leeway to refresh whenever you want. And you can refresh at any point during that time. At any point, when you have enough combo points and it's glowing, your Weakauras is glowing, you can refresh it. The general rule, if your Weakauras doesn't glow, or if your Plater doesn't glow, is Garrote, you want less than 5 seconds. Rupture, you want kind of less than 7-ish. That's sort of the benchmark. Crimson Tempest is the same thing. This would be like 3-4 seconds. Notably, this does not transfer damage. It only transfers duration, so it only makes the new application that you're casting longer. It does not add any like bonus damage or any bonus effects. It is just the timer itself. That also works on Envenom's duration for the poison application. And you'll see, if I am to generate some stuff here, you see this blue line, that is the Pandemic. So I can refresh it here. Right now there's 2 bars because Envenom's application stacks, but that also Pandemics. Okay, cooldown-wise, there are kind of 4 main cooldowns that we have. Deathmark, again, is our main 2-minute cooldown. Kingsbane is our 1-minute cooldown. Shiv is our 30-second cooldown. This is a baseline spell that we improve through certain talents. And then we have Vanish, which we also improve through certain talents. So, Deathmark is very interesting. Just hover it. It does damage. The damage is whatever. We don't care about the damage that the Deathmark does. What Deathmark also does, though, which does increase damage by a ton, is it duplicates the effects of Garrote, Rupture, and your lethal poisons. They deal the same damage as a normal application, but they count as duplicated debuffs. So what this means is you will have double applications of Amplifying Poison. So instead of 35% increased damage, you get double 35. You get 35 from one and 35 from the other. Deadly Poison, the dots tick twice. You have double the debuffs. Garrote and Rupture, they both grant energy. They're going to be granting double the energy because they're both on there. There's also this passive here, which is why it's an important thing that they're debuffs. It says your weapon poisons, nature damage over time, and bleed abilities deal 2% increased damage to targets for each weapon poison, nature damage over time, and bleed effect on them. So if you do some quick math, you have deadly poison, amplifying poison, crippling poison, atrophic poison, garrote, rupture, Deathmark, the bleed itself. Then you have duplicated garrote, duplicated rupture, duplicated deadly poison, duplicated amplifying poison, and Kingsbane for 12. That is a total of 12. So during your Deathmark window, in single target, you have a 24% increased damage to targets. This is really, really strong. It is a 2-pointer, but this is a fundamental thing of Assassination that makes Assassination really good during Burst, because this grants a bunch of extra stacks. Kingsbane, this is a ramping damage over time effect. Every time you apply a lethal poison, the damage ramps up to 50 stacks, which is 1,000% increased. It also does damage instantly, which is why we want to buff this. This is basically the main thing we play around in single target. Now, the stacks on Kingsbane themselves don't need to be tracked. They don't need to be micromanaged or anything. Your normal rotation will apply a bunch of poisons, and there's not really anything you could do about it, because the majority of poisons that you will apply throughout the rotation come from your auto attacks. Your auto attacks will be going constantly. You're attacking super fast with Slice and Dice active, so there's not much you can really control. They either proc or they don't, and that's just kind of how that has to be. The only real important thing to note about Kingsbane is that you want Envenom going into it. You want to Envenom before your Kingsbane so that you have the buff going so that you can apply poisons at the start. Obviously, because it's a ramping effect, it's weak at the start, but it has the longest duration remaining. Whereas once it's fully stacked, you might only get a couple seconds out of it. So you want to apply as many poisons as possible early on in your rotation so that it has that time, right? You don't waste too much time. During Deathmark, obviously with duplicated poisons, you're applying twice as many stacks. So Kingsbane will ramp incredibly quickly. It'll hit its max stacks in about 5 or 6 seconds. And then you'll have the additional roughly 10 seconds, 8 to 10 seconds left with your full damage Kingsbane. Outside of Deathmarks, it's very hard to cap Kingsbanes. It's just kind of not something that you need to worry about. Non-Deathmarked Kingsbanes kind of hit like a wet noodle. So don't worry about that too much. Just cast it on cooldown. It'll line back up every 2 minutes, and then you're good to go. Cool. The last one is Shiv. Shiv is just a button you have, which attacks your target and debuffs them because you take improved Shiv. Increases nature damage done against the target. Now, this is kind of your main bread and butter that glues everything together. Kingsbane does nature damage. Your Envenom does nature damage. Your poisons do nature damage. So buffing nature damage is really good. You can further augment this by taking Lightweight Shiv, which is a staple. It gives you 1 additional charge. This gives you 2, so you can cover the entire duration of Kingsbane, cover the entire duration of Deathmark, and have the effect kind of be a little bit easier to manage, so you're not always casting it exactly on cooldown, and you can let the charges bank a little bit. It's just a very good talent. There's also Tiny Toxic Blade. Shiv deals increased damage, costs no energy. This is something that has fallen out of favor and isn't taken these days, because Shiv itself does not deal any damage. It's only there for the debuff, really. It also isn't that expensive energy-wise. I have it right now, but if I were to change talents, you'll see that it's, I believe, 30 energy. We'll see if I'm right. It is indeed 30 energy. That's not too expensive. So this is just not really that great of a talent. However, this talent is. Arterial Precision makes your Shiv AoE, strikes 7 additional nearby enemies for a total of 8, so the target and 7 around it, and it also increases your bleed damage done to those targets by 30% for 8 seconds. So if you consider its implication here with Deathmark, that means you're increasing both the nature and bleed damage. Deathmark is duplicating your bleeds. You're getting more bleeds, more Arterial Precision, Round and round and round and round it goes, and we're buffing everything, and everything goes kaboom. Very cool. That is it, kind of cooldown-wise, except for one elephant in the room, and that is Vanish. Vanish is a baseline 2 minutes. You can get a second charge here, and going into the second charge, you have Subterfuge, which makes stealth effects persist for an additional 6 seconds with 2 points, right? So additional 6 seconds after stealth breaks. Why is stealth important? For starters, you have improved Garrote. Garrote deals a bunch of extra damage and has no cooldown when used from stealth and for 6 seconds after breaking stealth. This turns into 12 with Subterfuge. Then you have Indiscriminate Carnage, probably the main source of stealth-based interactions. Garrote and Rupture apply to 2 additional nearby enemies when used from stealth and for 6 seconds after breaking stealth. This is your main tool in AoE to spread your bleeds. You will want to hold Vanish for this in M+, and it is very, very, very good. Again, this also goes up to 12 seconds with Subterfuge. The last one is kind of generic. You just have extra crit chance while stealthed and after breaking stealth. This is again 6 seconds base, 12 with Subterfuge. Now, Indiscriminate Carnage is a cooldown in its own right. When you take this, Vanish basically becomes an Indiscriminate Carnage button. The thing to note about Indiscriminate Carnage is that the 2 additional that you apply to are smart. So if you don't have Rupture up on targets, it will prioritize those without Rupture. Same thing with Garrote. And so what this enables you is, while it is semi-suboptimal on some target counts, you can just pound into one target and it will just cleave. You don't need to do any target swapping, technically. Unless you're in Giga AoE, in which case your bleeds won't be that much value anyways. So in general, my recommendation is either you just stick to the target that you've been hitting in the first place, and you just live with it, and don't target swap. Or if you're super sweaty, you can make some mouse over macros and mouse over your bleeds that way, and then stick to your target with your autos and stuff. I personally don't use mouse over macros. There isn't that big of a difference, really, but it is technically super sweaty and super optimal to mouse over, so I want to have that as an option for you guys. Also to note, these Ruptures that apply to additional enemies, the Garrotes that apply to additional enemies, also carry the effects of all of the stuff. So the additional Ruptures give Scent of Blood, they will throw out Bone Spikes and give you comp points back. They will be improved through improved Garrote, all of that stuff, all that shebang. It all comes from Indiscriminate Carnage. There is no difference between an Indiscriminate Carnage Rupture and a regular Rupture. Ooh, boy. Okay. With that out of the way, it's time to talk about the one thing that I've been ignoring this entire time. The big topic, Venomous Wounds. Venomous Wounds is why bleeds give back energy. You regain 8 energy each time a Garrote or Rupture deal bleed damage, so basically when they tick, to a poison target. All of your targets will be poisoned. Venomize applies poisons, for example. So in AoE, everything will have poisons all the time. And Garrote and Rupture, as you'll be spreading them or applying them to your main target, they'll be giving you energy back. Notably, the second line, if an enemy dies while afflicted by your Rupture, you regain energy based on its remaining duration. This is semi-bugged and giving about 25% more energy than intended right now. Because the number never changed from its old, like, Warlords of Draenor version. So this gives you a huge chunk of energy back when a target dies with Rupture. And this will eventually go into something called Rupture Sniping, which we don't need to know about right now, but just know that rupturing things is very good, especially if you need energy, even if targets are about to die. If you need energy, energy is your main bottleneck on the spec. You should be rupturing things, even in AoE, even if they're about to die. It does not matter. If you need energy, you press Rupture. That is your big energy button. Okay. With that out of the way, the rest of this are kind of passives that we'll talk about in a separate thing. So let's head back. We covered our points. Next slide. Easy rotation. Now that we know everything about the spec, we're going to do 3 steps. We're going to get up our bleeds, we're going to press cooldowns, we're going to get rid of malware bites, and we're going to spam Envenom. So, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go into our target, get up our bleeds, right? Get up our Envenom, whatever. Press all of your cooldowns. So we have Deathmark, Shiv, Kingsbane, and now we're spamming Envenom. There are some stuff here that are related to some hero talents, but, oh, Shiv comes back up, we press Shiv. Oh, Garrote's falling off, we press Garrote. GG, you did it. I'm not geared, so, again, testing set, no damage, don't worry about it. But that is your rotation, and now without cooldowns, you're just here. Mutilating, going into an Envenom. Mutilating, until 5, going into an Envenom. Right, so on and so forth. That is your simple rotation, and that is also your rotation in AoE. That is literally the exact same rotation in AoE. If I take Indiscriminate Carnage, for example, and we pretend that this is a 3-target fight with absolutely cooked talents, you do the same thing, right? They're going to spread automatically, so you get your bleeds up, you get your AoE bleed up, then you're going to Envenom, you're going to get your cooldowns up, and then you're spamming Envenom again. You're just going for it. Spamming Envenom all day long. Oh, Garrote's falling. Crimson Tempest's falling. No worries. We'll get Crimson Tempest up. We'll Vanish for the Garrotes. We'll refresh our Rupture as that's coming into Pandemic. And we're right back to spamming Envenom. That's it. That is the spec in a nutshell. So thanks for watching. No, I'm just kidding. There's, of course, a lot more, and there's a lot of cringe min-maxes, and we'll get into all of it. So, energy. If you've played Assassination for any amount of time, yes, you will run out. Venomous Wounds on its own is not enough to sustain you forever, especially when your Mutilate costs 55 energy every other GCD, especially when your Fan of Knives costs 35 and you're spamming it all the time. Venomous Wounds in single target is not enough. In AoE, it does become enough eventually, usually around the point of having about 5 to 6 bleeds out, which again, 5 ruptures. So once you have 5 to 6 bleeds out, that will be enough energy to sustain you, but in single target, you will run out. There is nothing you can do about it. People ask me all the time, how do I deal with the energy? You just run out, okay? I wish there was gameplay involved with it. Blizzard took all of the gameplay away for the most part. There's only very, very minor min-maxes that we'll go over later that apply to this. You just run out, man. It sucks, but it is what it is. You just run out. Keep spamming, you'll be alright. You'll deal with it. In AoE, you can spread your ruptures, you can snipe your ruptures, get more energy back. GG, well played. Okay, so talent interactions. There's a bunch of talents here that are confusing for players that you might not understand what they do. The wording might be strange, so let's go over them. One of them, for example, is Zoldyck. We already went over Lethal Dose. Weapon Poison is a term. Bleed Ability is a term. Nature Damage over time is a term, right? And so the first thing I want to do is I want to point out our mastery. It says Poisons and Bleeds. Poisons and Bleeds as a keyword basically means everything. But you'll quickly find out that everything is not everything. For some reason. It's goddamn. Another version of Poisons and Bleeds. Zoldyck. Your Poisons and Bleeds deal 15% increased damage to targets below 35% health. This is our strong execute type talent. This is why we're good in execute. This goes up to 30% when you have 2 points in it. And Poisons and Bleeds in this case also means everything, including Kingsbane, including Envenom. Poison and Bleed, remember I said it applies to everything? Also applies to Envenom. Envenom is not a poison or a bleed, it is an instant damage, nature damage finisher. But it works. It works on that. Also works on Crimson Tempest, works on all of your damaging poisons, works on Garrote, works on Rupture. And there's also some bonus damage that this works on. So, for example, Vicious Venoms. This deals additional damage as nature, but it works with Mastery and it works with Zoldyck. You have Poison Bomb. This is just a pool of nature damage. Works with Mastery, works with Zoldyck. So there's weird stuff like that, but in general, if it says nature damage, probably works with Mastery. Some hero talent stuff that says plague damage or cosmic damage. Cosmic and Plague both have a portion of it that is nature. Also works with Mastery. Zoldyck? Don't know why, but very strange. The Assassination is just full of, is just riddled of this. Then there is a very, very big difference between poisons and weapon poisons. So again, poisons are things like Kingsbane, Envenom, all that kind of stuff. Your weapon poisons specifically are these. These are your weapon poisons. And notably, some things might say lethal weapon poisons, and some might say non-lethal weapon poisons. Again, those are the damaging ones and the non-damaging ones, right? For example, increases the non-damaging effect of your weapon poisons. That's all of them, but non-damaging effect also counts for the healing reduction here, because that's a non-damaging effect. So your weapon poisons, nature damage over time, Kingsbane, and bleed abilities, Garrote, Rupture, blah, blah, blah. That's what those are, right? You might see the damage of your weapon poisons here. Again, that is just the damage of these. Application of weapon poisons, that also counts for your crippling and atrophic, right? Etc., etc. You can figure it out on your own. Critical strikes of Fan and Knives, apply your weapon poisons. Again, that's these. Once you know the keywords, you can piece it together pretty quickly. So the hero talent stuff and how this fits into it. Mastery affects hero talent things. Zoldyck does not. The reason why this is important is that a lot of Deathstalker's damage comes from buffing up Envenom, whereas a lot of Fatebound's damage comes from flipping the coin and getting instant damage. I'm not going to go over the hero talents right now, but instant damage on the coin here on Hand of Fate is not affected by Zoldyck, whereas the Envenom buff, obviously Envenom is affected by Zoldyck, so the Envenom buffing stuff here is the instant damage stuff, like the Deathstalker's Mark or Hunt Them Down here. These are still not affected by Zoldyck. None of the hero talent stuff is that does damage. However, obviously, if you buff, for example here, Envenom by 60%, 60% bigger Envenom, Envenom is buffed by Zoldyck, therefore it is better. So Deathstalker is better in Execute generally because it scales things that are affected by Zoldyck. Okay. One last thing, I promise, before we start heading into some other things like talent builds. I know it's been almost an hour already, and I'm still on the basics. I said I wanted this to be as comprehensive as possible. Okay. Twist the Knife. This works like Iron Fur, whereas it's rolling stacks, and Envenom can overlap twice. So those are the green bars you saw. So for example, here's the first one. Now the second one will not overwrite this. It'll just add a second one, but this duration will time out on its own independently. Right? This is a good way to visualize it for me in my head. You don't really need to worry about it. Just know that if Envenom is overlapped, it's better, and it doubles some stuff. For example, it doubles the effects of Dashing Scoundrel, which increases the critical strike chance of your weapon poisons, which in this case also means Envenom. Don't ask me why it's like this. Don't ask. That's just how it is. I don't know, okay? But in this case, weapon poisons also means Envenom. So you get more Envenom crits. Pog. You also get critical strikes on your weapon poisons generate additional energy. This part only works on your weapon poisons. Envenom will not refund 1 energy. It also doesn't work with Poison Bomb, or I think it works with Poison Bomb, but only on an ICD, so it doesn't give you energy back on every crit that it does in AoE, only on the Spec's a disaster, man. You're getting extra energy back. That's all you need to know. Cool. One last thing. I know I said one last thing twice. Caustic Spatter here is an interesting AoE talent that only makes sense once we've discovered everything else. So you need to use Mutilate on a target afflicted by Rupture and Deadly Poison to apply Caustic Spatter. This tooltip sucks. We'll get into that. Caustic Spatter causes 40% of your poison damage dealt to splash onto other nearby enemies, reduced beyond 5 targets. That tooltip also sucks. So, with the basis of everything we know and how janky those keywords are, using Mutilate on a target afflicted by a Rupture. Now, it's true that the target has to be afflicted by Rupture. Without Rupture, it's not going to work. However, I'm going to apply Amplifying Poison. This is a debuffed. This is a debuff poison, right? It applies a debuff. You see it here. It's a weapon poison, a lethal weapon poison that is a debuff. If I were to Mutilate now, I get Caustic Spatter. So, not just Deadly Poison, but also Amp. This also works with Wound Poison, if I'm... let's check. I'm actually not sure if it works with Wound Poison. We're going to do some live testing. We don't ever use Wound Poison in PvE, so I actually don't know. Okay, Wound Poison doesn't work, so it's either Amplifying or Deadly. Make it make sense. Okay, so Amplifying Poison or Deadly. Using Mutilate, that's wrong. It works with Ambush, so using Mutilate or Ambush on a target afflicted by a Rupture, and Deadly Poison or Amplifying Poison applies Caustic Spatter. Cool. Caustic Spatter causes 40% of your poison damage. No, it's 40% of your nature damage. That includes things like plague damage from the hero talents. That includes things like cosmic damage from the hero talents. Those all spatter. And technically the 40% is also wrong because it's double dipping some stuff, so it's actually closer to 48%. So there's more things wrong with this tooltip than there is right. However, at the end of the day, what you need to understand is if you have Caustic Spatter up, this is the target that you're hitting. So you get Caustic Spatter up, guess what? You are pumping all of your Envenoms into this guy. This is now your best friend in the whole wide world, and you will pump into this guy your hot Envenom loads. This was a mistake, recording this so late. You want to keep this up. This does not pandemic, so you need to just mutilate. Make sure you're mutilating. Make sure this has 100% uptime in AoE. Super, 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 super important. Okay. Next thing. Talent builds. And then if I move my face, we have some rotation stuff. Okay, so talent builds. Single target. This is where we start talking about hero talent stuff. While I quickly make this, I will say that for people unfamiliar so far with how War Within has gone for Assassination Rogue, the important thing to note is that Fatebound has had 0 play rate. Fatebound is just terrible in all regards. However, it is finally making a comeback. They buffed it a ton going into the season, and we're finally playing it. This is your single target build. Sorry, this is your single target build. If there's any ads, you would play Caustic Spatter. This is just an extra bleed on Rupture. Don't need to worry about it. This is what you will play in raids on single target bosses with Fatebound. So, what do you need to know? Fatebound, you flip a coin, either heads or tails, when you can do a finishing move with 5 or more combo points. 5 is an important number. If you flip heads, it increases the damage of all your attacks. If you flip tails, it just does instant damage, and if you flip in a row, it increases. So if you have multiple heads in a row, the buff gets stronger. If you have multiple tails in a row, the damage gets up. Then you have a bunch of stuff. Coins flipped by Envenom are more likely to match the previous flip. You have some extra bonus Envenom damage. This is completely passive. You don't need to worry about it. Just extra Envenom damage. You have an extra combo point stuff on Deal Fate here. So this just buffs Seal Fate to get 1 additional extra combo point. Notably, this doesn't double the effects of Seal Fate. This is 1 flat combo point. So even if you crit 15 times, this will still only give you 1 additional. Then you have some stuff that augments the flips themselves. We'll start with Deliver Doom. This is part of the reason why Fatebound sucks in AoE, because your Tails coins deal increased damage if there's no enemies near the target, but it reduces the bonus if there are enemies near the target. So on 6 targets, 5 additional nearby enemies, this talent does nothing. This is a dead talent that does nothing if you have 6 targets. That's really bad. So that's part of the reason why Fatebound's bad. Then you have the Capstone Fateful Ending. When your coin flips the same face 7 times in a row, so either 7 heads or 7 tails, you gain a big agility buff, and it also deals some extra damage if you already have that buff. We will be guaranteeing this buff in your in opener with the tier set, so no need to worry about that. And then you have kind of the cooldown setup. So Edge Case, activating Deathmark, flips a coin, causing it to land on its edge, counting as both heads and tails. So you get both effects with 1 flip. We are going to be extending this through the use of Cold Blood with Inevitable End, which makes it only apply to Envenom. However, the coins flipped by these Envenoms match the same flip. So the combo is that we macro Cold Blood to Kingsbane, and then when we flip our Edge Case coin, our next 2 Envenoms are going to be matching the Edge Case as well, and we'll get a total of 3 Edge Case flips. With the tier set, it's going to be more than that. It's going to be 6. Double Jeopardy, this is our Vanish button. We aren't taking any Vanish talents, right? No Improved Growth, no Master Assassin, no Indiscriminate Carnage because it's single target. However, this is going to make us vanish. We vanish during the effects of Cold Blood so that we can flip an additional coin. Additional Edge Case, more Edge Cases, really good. That's Fatebound. That's literally all you do with Fatebound. It's very passive. You just flip your coins, call it a day. Macro Cold Blood into Kingsbane, good to go. The timing just lines up. The important thing about Fatebound is the tier set here. When you have the 2-piece, your Kingsbane does 10% increased damage and has 4-second increased duration. That's important because remember Kingsbane ramps, which means you'll have 4 seconds of the maximum ramp. The other thing is that Edge Case flips an additional coin, so you're flipping 2 coins, and activating Kingsbane triggers its effect. So when you press Deathmark and then press Kingsbane, when they line up, you'll be flipping 4 of these special Edge Case coins. Then you'll be getting 2 more from Inevitable End. And then you'll be flipping an additional coin with the Vanish to get a 7th coin of both heads and tails. So 7 coins when everything lines up. Pretty good. Pretty good stuff. Notably, Destiny Defined here is really, really bad. This is not playable anywhere. It just increases your poisons and gives an additional chance to match the same face. But this cannot match Edge Case flips, and we don't care about this. So you have to play Inevitable End because they typoed the name. So Inevitable End, really good, must take Cold Blood. Destiny Defined, super poop, don't take. Otherwise, you just have some useless stuff here. Shadow Step can be used a 2nd time within 3 seconds. It's not really all that great. It does also increase the cooldown, so if you want to avoid the cooldown increase, you can take Inexorable March. This is basically never useful, because it still makes you slowed, and it's also conditional. But at least you aren't increasing the cooldown of your Shadow Step, so that's neat. And then this is your defensive node. You either have a little bit of extra leech, or you have a chance to reduce the damage taken. The damage taken reduction is usually better. But if you super want leech, you can take the leech. Both of these are kind of inconsequential, so who cares? Other than that, nothing here is really out of the ordinary. I'll go over why we take some stuff, however, some notable things. So on the class tree here, we are taking the cooldown reduction on sprint as well as the buff to sprint. This is 4 seconds increased duration, additional movement speed. These are very powerful, must takes everywhere. As is Graceful Guile, giving Feint an additional charge. Also a must-have. These 3 points are how you're routing down through this tree. Not taking these would be trolling. The other thing that would be trolling not to take is either Numbing or Atrophic Poison, which is why you have to come down this way. These 2 points are for Crippling and Wound Poison, which aren't impactful, and we don't use Wound Poison. So it kind of forces us into the middle and then pushes us back out, gives us a movement speed buff, gives us a little bit of extra healing, and then gives us a physical damage taken reduction. We take our poison, we take some crit chance for combo points, right? Crit chance on generators means more Seal Fate combo points. And then up here, there are some choices to be made. You want to take Evasion because it's just generically good and it's at the top of the tree. You want to take Master Poisoner in order to increase the damage, the non-damaging effects. So that's how we get Atrophic to 3.6%. Then we're taking Airborne Irritant here. This is also, in my opinion, a must-take. It reduces the cooldown on Blind and applies to all nearby enemies. So this is how we get our AoE Disorient, our AoE Stop. You basically want this always. Then you're getting an additional Shadow Step charge. This is also basically required. Then here you kind of have some choices. So Shadowrunner is just generically good, especially in Mythic Plus, not so much in Raid. And then my choice is Blackjack, and this is controversial. Tricks of the Trade redirects all threat. This is very strong in Mythic Plus situations where your tank isn't getting aggro or you're having to help group the mobs up. So Tricks of the Trade, very good in Mythic Plus. However, Blackjack can be incredibly strong. This gives your Blind, which again we are making AoE, a 30% damage and healing reduction for 6 seconds. This doesn't always work. On some ads, this won't work. However, when it does work, and in certain situations, this can be incredibly strong. This was, for example, one of the biggest damage reductions that your raid could have when the roots came out on Tindril in Amir Drasil. When those roots came out, you could Blind with Blackjack, reduce their damage done, and it was the biggest DR that you could have at that time if it lined up properly. It was bigger than any healing cooldown. So in some situations, very impactful. In other situations, kind of whatever. But redirecting threat as a raid in a raid fight isn't really all that great. Your tanks shouldn't be losing aggro in raid, so not really that important. With that, we come to the bottom part of the tree. This first row is just passives. This is passive crit. This is passive haste. Doesn't matter. Soothing Darkness is a heal, doesn't matter. Leeching Poison, pretty good, but it got nerfed, so it kind of doesn't matter. And Recuperate is also a heal, kind of doesn't matter. That's that first row. Second row, you got Maximum Energy and T. You'll be taking this always. This is a required set of talents in all content for Assassination Rogue. Having additional energy regeneration, additional maximum energy, and some additional energy through Thistletea with some mastery buffs is incredibly good. If this Thistletea thing auto-procs, it's fine. We don't care. We just want it. Macro it to Shiv. Forget it exists. I have it keybound for old time's sake, but you don't need it keybound. You simply macro it to Shiv and forget. Cool. The next thing, Supercharger. This is the old Kyrian spell for people who played Shadowlands. However, it's been reworked substantially. When you take, I'll just take points out of this just to show you. When you take Supercharger, what ends up happening is you press Shiv and some combo points will light up on your screen. I don't track them on my Weakauras, but you can see it in the default UI here. They turn this blue tint. The only thing that matters about these blue combo points is that your next finishers will count as having additional combo points. So Supercharger baseline is function as if they spent 2 additional combo points. This does overcap, so if you spend a 7 combo point in Venom, this would be 9. And then with Forced Induction, the bonus goes up by 1, so this would be a 10 combo point in Venom. So it does overcap. It also counts for, if you cast it at 2, it'll be 5, which will flip the coins and trigger all of those effects. The other option here is Echoing Reprimand, which is after consuming a point, your Mutilate deals additional damage. This is really bad. We just don't take this ever. So that's what that does. Cold Blood we already talked about. Normally this increases your next damage, crit strike chance of your next damaging ability. Because we're taking Inevitable End, this only applies to Envenom, so no problems there. We macro this to Kingsbane for the timing, and then, again, ignore it completely. Then we have 2 talents, which are identical. We have Deeper Stratagem, which gives us an additional max combo point, but also increases the damage of our finishing moves. Finishing moves that consume more than 5 combo points have increased effects, and your finishing moves deal 5% increased damage. We take Deeper Stratagem to have an extra combo point. Increased damage of finishers, really good. Take the same talent over here, Sanguine Stratagem, to do the same thing, an additional combo point. That's how we get to 7. The last thing, this is an M+, basically, and not in Raid. Subterfuge, we already talked about, increasing the effects of Indiscriminate Carnage, Master Assassin, and Improved Garrote, and having an additional Vanish charge for Without a Trace to give you an additional Vanish charge, very good in M+ situations, so that you can be a little more varied with your casts. In raids, doesn't matter. Okay, that's everything class tree wise. That's why we take everything we do. Looking at the spec tree now, these are kind of required points. Just pathing wise, increases your maximum energy, increases the damage of your bleeds. Then you have Rapid Injection. While you have the Envenom buff, Envenom deals more damage. This was a tier set bonus that was incredibly strong for people who remember Amir Drasil Season 3 of Dragonflight. In its talent form, this is inconsequential, and we take this simply because of the pathing. We don't play around this at all. Seal Fate, obviously, is your additional combo points. Venomous Wounds, we talked about, is our energy. And Improved Shiv is our nature damage done debuff that we also talked about in our cooldown section. We also get Deadly Poison here. This is our opener for the tree. Obviously, we want to use Deadly Poison over Instant Poison whenever possible. A lot of the extra stuff here is just bonus damage. So, for example, here, Vicious Venoms makes Ambush and Mutilate deal 70% increased nature damage and cost a little bit more energy. This is a huge damage buff to Mutilate and Ambush, and we will want to be playing this on every raid fight. This is nature damage, so it also cleaves through Caustic Spatter in AoE fights when we take Caustic Spatter. Then we talked about Lethal Dose, right? Just increased damage. Doomblade makes your Mutilate apply a bleed, which feeds into Lethal Dose. Serrated Bone Spike is a bit of extra damage on when you Rupture, and it gives you some combo points back. Also feeds into Lethal Dose. Systemic Failure, this is just passive damage. This is just passive damage. Amplifying Poison, we talked about. Twist the Knife, not really important. This just increases the effects of Envenom and allows it to stack. This is just generically good. Dashing Scoundrel makes the Envenom buff stronger by making the weapon poisons give energy back and increasing the damage of Envenom. So we take that. Always good. More energy is good. Blindside makes a proc happen. It gives a chance for your Ambush and Mutilate to make your next ambush free and usable without stealth. This is powerful simply because it's free. You also don't need an extra keybind for this. It will just simply replace your Mutilate when it procs. So you can just keep hitting your Mutilate button and it'll just go. No thought required. There's no way around this. You cannot hold this for any reason. Just consume it whenever it procs. Then the last thing's Poison Bomb. Whenever you Envenom, you just have a chance to deal extra damage. This is our Execute for poisons and bleeds, right? We're also buffing our bleeds with Shiv, so this goes into our Deathmark for that loop. Kingsbane is our main cooldown for single target, also interacting with Deathmark. And then we take Dragon Tempered Blades, which we have not talked about, but is very easy to understand. It simply allows you to take 2 poisons at once, so I can take both Deadly and Amplifying, as well as Crippling and a trophic. 2 lethals, 2 non-lethals. That again increases lethal dose stacks, but it also has a slight penalty to it in order to not make it too OP. Nothing to do about this. It's simply passive. We take it, we have fun, and we have a good time. Now, what changes when we go to Deathstalker? When we go to Deathstalker, first of all, we take Supercharger because we don't have the Cold Blood talent. So we take Supercharger and Force Induction. We go Deathstalker, and that is it. That is the only difference on either of these trees that happens. Now, you'll be playing Deathstalker in mostly AoE situations in Raid, which is why you'd want to be taking Caustic Spatter and not Internal Bleeding. But aside from that, everything stays the same. None of this stuff changes. So what does Deathstalker do? Deathstalker has a little minigame with Deathstalker's Mark. This is more involved than Fatebound. And again, when you spend 5 or more combo points on attacks against a marked target, that is still an effect that we have here, so we still need to be using 5 combo point finishers. However, I want to show you the main gameplay loop of Deathstalker without talking about it, because I think it's easier to understand visually than it is if I just read off the tooltips, right? So, for starters, we need to apply this glowing debuff. The only way to do that, if you're just fresh to a fight, is by ambushing from stealth. This is why we put ambush on our stealth bar. If push comes to shove, you can vanish into an ambush, but start in stealth and always start with an ambush. That will apply this debuff. It has 3 stacks and a giant duration. Every time you use a finisher with 5 or more combo points, the stacks will break down. So now we're at 2. Now we're at 1. And when you consume this final stack, you'll get a new buff. This buff is called Darkest Night. And in order to put the mark back on your target, you have to consume a maximum combo point in Venom. So we're going to build all the way to 7 here for the pink combo point. And then when we Envenom, we get 3 stacks back and the cycle will repeat. That is the gameplay loop of Deathstalker that you will need to be playing the entire time. That is the bread and butter. Notably also, this Darkest Night buff that we got for the Giga Envenom, it is so strong, so unimaginably, unbelievably strong, that you will always want to prioritize this Envenom over everything else. I know that I said in the general rotation that you want bleeds, cooldowns, and Venom. When you have Darkest Night up, you throw all of that out of the window. Even if this Rupture were to fully drop, your biggest number 1 priority is this Envenom. This is your number 1 priority, getting this mark back up, nothing else. You basically just beeline it. That's the gameplay loop. Now, there are some other stuff attached to the mark that we'll go over. So, for example, you saw a little icon pop up when I applied the mark. That is called Clear the Witnesses. Your next Fan of Knives after applying Deathstalker mark deals additional plague damage and generates an additional combo point. This is plague damage per target, and it makes Fan of Knives hit significantly harder. There is some min-maxing involved with this, but for now, just know that it exists. Then you have auto attacks against marked targets deal an additional 30,000 plague damage. Now this is plague damage, which is nature damage, so this will Caustic Spatter, which is why you always want to be hitting your marked target. On top of that, the mark itself does damage when you consume an application, and it also increases the damage of your next ambush or mutilate, which again feeds into Vicious Venoms. You'll have it more additional damage because they're dealing more damage baseline. Then you have some other passive stuff. Fatal Intent applies a debuff. When the target goes under 20%, it deals some damage. This is severely undertuned and not worth mentioning because it just doesn't really do any damage. The other thing is Corrupt the Blood. Whenever Rupture deals damage, it deals additional damage, it stacks, and the Rupture duration is increased. This is pretty strong, but it is entirely passive. You don't need to worry about it at all. It's just bonus damage, right? This is just free bonus damage. You don't need to care, don't need to do anything. Then we come up on a choice node here. Lingering Darkness, after Deathmark expires, notably Deathmark is your 2-minute cooldown, not Deathstalker's Mark. That's something people get flipped all the time. My nose is so itchy lately. I don't know why. Maybe it's allergies or something. I cannot deal with it. Oh my god. Anyways, after Deathmark expires, you gain 30 seconds of 30% increased nature damage. This feeds into all of your stuff, right? Your Envenom, your Kingsbane, which shouldn't really be up anymore, but it could be. And your Caustic Spatter, of course, does nature damage as well, so this would increase. Now, obviously, it doesn't double dip in that regard, so like if you're feeding Envenom into it already, it's getting buffed by this, so it doesn't get buffed again by Caustic Spatter. So just to clear up any confusion, you're dealing more Caustic Spatter damage because your Lingering Darkness is buffing Envenom, right? More Envenom damage means more Caustic Spatter. Okay. The alternative, Shiv increases the damage of your next Envenom by 18%. What the hell was Blizzard thinking with this? This is 30% nature damage for 30 seconds, which is buffing Envenom by 30%. This is buffing 1 Envenom by 18%. What? This sucks. This sucks real bad. I don't know why this exists. Don't ever use this. If I see you using this, I will find where you live. This is terrible. This is by far the worst talent on this tree. Then you have some stuff. This is the most interesting choice node I have ever seen. And I say that sarcastically because for some reason, Blizzard once again decided to do the same thing. This one says, Fan of Knives, when you crit strike with Fan of Knives, increase the chance of the crit strike chance of Fan of Knives and Black Powder. Tooltip errors, it should say Crimson Tempest. It says Black Powder. So increases the crit strike chance of Fan of Knives and Crimson Tempest, as well as the crit strike damage by 32% for 12 seconds. So when you crit with Fan of Knives, which will be all the time in AoE, you deal more damage with Fan of Knives, more damage with Crimson Tempest. You get more combo points from Fan of Knives because of the crit chance. Cool. The alternative, Fan of Knives and Crimson Tempest deal 30% additional damage. It's the same thing. Now, with a bleed build and Mythic Plus, Follow the Blood can be better in some situations. Momentum of Despair is kind of the auto snap take because you also get additional combo points, and that can be situationally better. But what the hell? It's the same. It's the same thing. Then, unlike Fatebound, the defensive and utility points are really, really strong. So you have Ethereal Cloak, which increases the duration of Cloak of Shadows. This can be very good if you need to immune something or like multiple hits. Can be very strong. The auto take, though, is the incredibly powerful Bait and Switch. Bait and Switch makes evasion reduce magic damage taken by 20%, and Cloak of Shadows reduce physical damage taken by 20%. You would never really cloak for this reduction. However, evasion is kind of useless until you take Bait and Switch, or if you take Elusiveness, which is more of an M+ thing. So, Bait and Switch, powerful, powerful thing. 20% magic DR for 10 seconds. Super strong. The other talent here is Shadewalker. Each time you consume a stack of Deathstalker's Mark, you reduce the cooldown of Shadow Step. This basically makes it so you always have Shadow Step. Unless you're spamming Shadow Step, you will have Shadow Step all the time as Deathstalker. Very, very good. The other one, very, very situational use. Shroud of Concealment duration increased by 5 seconds. That's the big AoE shroud that shrouds you and your friends. It's fine. It's not anything crazy. It's whatever. If there's a skip that requires it, you take it. Otherwise, you don't take it. Another capstone. When you consume the final Deathstalker's Mark, right, that's the Darkest Night. First of all, you gain 40 energy, and your next Envenom cast with maximum combo points is guaranteed to critical strike, and it deals 60% additional damage and then reapplies the mark. This is buffed in certain ways through the tier set. For example here, Shiv increases the effectiveness of all Deathstalker damage effects and damage bonuses. This does work on Darkest Night, so you get a 96% increased damage Envenom. It hits like a truck. There are some min-maxes regarding that we'll talk about later. The 4-piece here doesn't really matter too much, except that Shiv does consume an application of your mark. So in single target raid situations, you will want to avoid that. Otherwise, pretty stock standard stuff. You just play the minigame. Everything else remains the same. Not that bad. There is one talent that I skipped for those keen-eyed of you. Singular Focus. This is a little bit hard to explain, but it is a funnel talent. Any damage you deal to non-marked targets, so not the boss, comes back into the boss, deals additional damage, you funnel a bunch of AoE back into the boss. Huge single target. We love that. There is a lot of jank with this ability. Don't worry about the numbers behind it or anything. Just know that as you hit other things and you Caustic Spatter or you spread your bleeds, you'll be doing a little bit more prio damage, and that's all you need to worry about. The math behind this is incredibly buggy and probably changing, and also is just a nightmare. It's a disaster. I could spend an entire hour just talking about the jank of Singular Focus and Caustic Spatter and all of the interactions. It's not important, though. No one needs to know. It doesn't matter. It's gonna change, so ignore it. So that's that. Now, getting my ugly fat head out of the way. Cooldown, cooldown, cooldown. I don't know why I did cooldown 3 times, but this is literally what you do. Now, there is some differences for single target if you have any adds and if you have a council style cleave. However, Fatebound is your go-to in single target. Fatebound is significantly stronger in single target than it is in AoE situations because the tail's damage is reduced. Deathstalker is kind of weak in single target, but half of the tree is AoE talents. So when you get to any adds at all, Fatebound gets worse, and you want to switch to Deathstalker in order to get the AoE effects. Now, you have to take Caustic whenever there's adds out. The alternative is Internal Bleeding. Internal Bleeding is terrible. So that is something to keep in mind. And depending on how much there are adds up, you can get away with it on Fatebound. For example, on Lumathar, there are some cleave adds in Phase 1. However, for the most part, if there's adds, probably should consider swapping off Fatebound, especially on some of the AoE heavier fights, such as Forge Weaver Araz. Forge Weaver Araz has a lot of adds. You probably don't want to play Fatebound on that. Same on Soulbinder. Soulbinder is just giga ad control. Fatebound sucks. Don't play it. Then you have the 3-target Council Cleave. This is, again, not a Fatebound fight, but you do want to take Crimson Tempest. And so we just do this, and we take Crimson Tempest, and life is good. Just take the points out, cleave some stuff. Crimson Tempest, good to go. Thumbs up. We love it. Now, for the rotation thing, cooldown, cooldown, cooldown. Copied it 3 times so that it looks symmetrical. Literally the same thing. But you want to prep for your Kingsbanes, and I will show you the opener in a second. You can also look this up on the Wowhead guide, which I have actually pulled up so that I can show you. The formatting on this is a little jank, but Wowhead guide, rotation guide, right? There's an opener here. You want to apply your mark if you're playing Deathstalker, get your bleeds up, Envenom, cooldowns, and then you spam Envenoms, right? Remember how I talked about that earlier? It's the same thing. Bleeds, Envenom to prep your Kingsbane so that it ramps, press your cooldowns, spam Envenom. Fatebound, you're going to notice a pattern. Bleeds, you don't need to ambush because there's no mark, right? So bleeds, prep your Kingsbane, press your cooldowns, spam Envenom. Okay, let's go into game, take a look at how this works out. So right now we're playing Deathstalker here. So again, ambush. This applies your mark, then you're going to get your bleeds up, Rupture with 5 combo points, of course. You're going to prep your cooldowns, prep your Kingsbane by starting your ramp with an Envenom. Then you're going to press Deathmark, Shiv, Kingsbane, and you're off. This is that. You did it. That is your opener. Now you're in here. You're going to refresh Shiv when it expires. And otherwise, you're just spamming Envenoms. That's it. That's all you do. This is your rotation. And now you're going to wait until your Kingsbane comes back up. You're going to maintain your bleeds. And you're just going to live your life happy. Blissful glee. We're going to hold our Shiv here. There is a min-max that we can do. I'm not going to go over that right now. Again, min-maxes come later. But this is just the basic rotation. If you're not Omega sweaty, you don't want a super duper super Omega min-max, this is your rotation. This is all that you do. Now, as Kingsbane comes back up, we're going to hold our DPS a little bit, hold our energy a little bit. This is a concept known as pooling, so I'm going to hold just a tad, and then I'm going to do the same thing. Envenom, Shiv, Kingsbane, we're off. Once the first Shiv drops, we're going to press the second one. We get maximum uptime. And otherwise, we're just doing it. Gonna get our Darkest Night back up, and now we're just waiting for 2-minute cooldowns again, right? So that is the rotation, straightforward and simple. On Fatebound, it is the exact same thing, but because we have everything macroed and we don't need to do the mark minigame with Deathstalker, it actually becomes even easier. Even easier. So, again, we're starting in stealth so that we can get up to the boss. We don't need to ambush, right? There's no mark, so we don't need to ambush. And instead, all that we're doing as I stall for my cooldowns to come back up in a non-suspicious way is we're just going to apply our bleeds. And then, once again, we are going to rep our Kingsbane window. Now, with Fatebound, there is a little bit of a min-max. Doesn't really matter right now. Everything is macroed. We vanish to double flip. We press Shiv again once it drops. We have our coins flipped. We have our capstone buff for the extra agility. We're done. That's it. We're right back into the same rotation. We're going to build to 5. We're going to press Envenom. We're waiting for our Kingsbane to come back up. When it does come back up, we're going to press all of our buttons again. That's literally it. This is Assassination in Raid. It's very straightforward. There's not really much that can go wrong here. There are some tiny min-maxes, but for the most part, as long as you maintain your bleeds, press your cooldowns together, and spam Envenom, you should be good to go. So that's that. Welcome to raiding as Assassination. Now, Mythic Plus. Oh boy. This is going to be the bulk of the video because Mythic Plus requires a lot of talking. So if you thought the first hour and a half was a long time, buckle in. I'm going to take another swig of my water as I run out. Okay, so for Mythic Plus, there are 3 archetypes. We play 3 different archetypes in Mythic Plus because they all have their sort of own niche and their own personality. And those 3 are called Bleed, Hybrid, and then some people call it Forced Induction or FI. Most people call it Cleave. Some people call it No-Garrote. And so this is kind of a scale from most AoE but least single target to most single target but kind of weaker in the AoE department. Now you can see a bunch of bullet points here that I wrote. You have the worst boss damage, but it has good prio damage because it abuses singular focus on Deathstalker to funnel damage back in. Your cooldowns don't really matter because you don't have Kingsbane. So you can just press Shiv. Deathmark doesn't really do anything in AoE. So this is really good. Quality of life rotationally. You just kind of press things and then you keep blasting because your bleeds are simply just going off, right? Deathstalker does a lot of the work. Bleeds do a lot of the work. Your Deathmark is kind of whatever. You don't have Kingsbane to micromanage. You press Shiv in AoE. The downside, however, is you kind of have to play Master Assassin. You don't have to, but it is highly recommended. You'd be losing a lot of damage not doing so. I also have a damage breakdown here that we'll go over with all 3. Hybrid is the best of both worlds, except, My bad. Except these days, it's kind of the worst of both worlds. It doesn't have a niche. This used to be the build everyone played, but these days, it's just not popular anymore because anything that the build does, there are other builds like Bleed or Cleave that simply do that niche better. And so rotationally, it's a little awkward because you have to try and balance both sides of this coin, and you have issues just getting everything together, working cohesively. It's a little bit janky compared to the other two. So that's kind of the issue with hybrid. And then you have the Cleave, no Garrote builds. They do the most single target out of all of them. However, if there are adds present, Bleed build can funnel a little bit harder with singular focus. So that is something to keep in mind. And this gets... the Forced Induction Cleave builds get some energy back from Dashing Scoundrel, whereas the Bleed build is going to be able to snipe Ruptures for energy off of the adds. So in a situation where there's adds on the target, you get a little bit better value off of those with a Bleed build than you do with a Cleave build. So in those situations... Cleave kind of loses a little bit, but in raw single target, nothing is going to beat a no Garrote build. It is a bit rough to play because you're not spreading Garrotes, and you kind of need to rely a lot on your poisons in order to get your energy back. So it lacks a little bit of quality of life in that department, but if you love Envenom spamming, this might actually be more intuitive to you. It can be a little bit rough though because you're sort of actively trying to avoid casting bleeds in favor of casting more Envenoms. So that's kind of what I mean with the quality of life. And right now, with current balance going into Season 3, it seems to just be worse after Bleed's got some buffs on the PTR. Bleed is sort of what everything has been playing. Now, I do have PTR logs, and I normally really hate PTR data because PTR data is not all that trustworthy. However, I think it's important to kind of look at the breakdown here. I have 3 builds, one from the homie Charend, regular in the Ravenholt Discord, nice guy, good M+ player, he's like top 5 in the world. And then I have these 2 logs from Chinese players. I believe this is actually the same Chinese guy. These are 17s for Priory, Tazavesh, and then a Dawnbreaker. So high keys on PTR. These are basically the best of the best. And you can see on this first one that we're going to look at, this is the Bleed build. So we are not taking Crimson Tempest. We're full on loading into our 2-year-old Precision and all of the Bleed talents. We're taking Sudden Demise for the increased Bleed damage and the Executes damage. We're getting some extra agility from Sense of Blood. This is a requirement in AoE. We're also taking the Garrote talents, right? So we can get Giga Garrotes. We're taking the additional stealth effect stuff because we are taking all of the stealth talents, and we're taking an additional charge of Vanish. He's opting here to take Follow the Blood for the additional damage. You can take Momentum of Despair. Both are fine. And it's, of course, Deathstalker because Fatebound Sucks in AoE. So looking at the damage breakdown here, on a Priory, this is a pretty AoE-heavy key. You can see Caustic Spatter is doing a lot of the work. This is up all the time, so you'll be seeing this a lot in Cleave situations. Then next you have Crimson Tempest dealing a ton of damage. Rupture, this is a breakdown of both Corrupt the Blood, Serrated Bone Spec, and Rupture, but Rupture is doing a ton of damage as well. Sanguine Blades is doing a ton. I didn't go over this, but this is passive damage whenever you're above 50% maximum energy. In AoE, this will trigger itself, so you don't really need to worry about this. And as you have enough Ruptures and enough Garrotes out to fill up your Sense of Blood, for example, this should have 100% uptime. So there's no real gameplay around Sanguine Blades. This is just passive extra damage. You can see that's doing a ton of damage as well. Garrote's doing a ton of damage. Then you have Singular Focus, which is funneling back into the target. And then down here, you finally have your Envenom, your Deadly Poison. This doesn't take double poison, so there's no amp poison on here. But you have some Deathstalker stuff, which is funneling back into Caustic Spatter, because this is nature damage. But most of this breakdown is bleed, 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 singular focus, right? AoE, nature damage, Caustic Spatter, this is your main filler. And then you have Crimson Tempest bleed, Rupture bleed, Sanguine Blades bleed, Garrote bleed, everything funneling back in. right? Bleed, 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 everything bleed. That's the breakdown for bleed. Where you can see a difference now is in this, which is a very rare these days, hybrid build. Hybrid does take Kingsbane and Dragon Tempered Blades, but it mostly stays on this right side and keeps the structure of Improved Garrote, Master Assassin, Shrouded Suffocation, and it takes Subterfuge and Without a Trace. Now, in this case, they're taking Follow the Blood again. This is, in my opinion, a mistake. Momentum of Despair is better as you get with non-bleed builds. So, not sure why he did this, but shouldn't matter too much for what we're looking at. And as you can see here, Envenom's doing a lot of the work, because Poison Bomb's back, and Venom's doing a lot of the work because you have Amplifying Poison buffing Envenom, and Caustic Spatter is way heads and shoulders above the rest. You still have Crimson Tempest and Rupture doing a lot of damage, still have Sanguine Blades and Garrote doing a lot of damage, but it's significantly less. And you can see that here, Crimson Tempest, 14% of the overall versus 10%, right? This is a huge difference. Rupture is sort of hanging out, but it is, you know, a lot of bonuses stacked on top of each other in a trench coat, and you want to be cleaving Ruptures regardless of build, so Rupture will stay relatively stable. And then you see Garrote falling off quite a bit, and you see Sanguine Blades also falling off quite a bit because the bleeds are just doing less damage. Fan of Knives makes a surprise appearance here, mostly because of Clear the Witnesses. This is the extra bonus damage when you apply the Deathstalker mark. Kingsbane makes a return, which is why Caustic Spatter is also so high. And the single target damage here is a lot higher. So if we, for example, go to a single target fight like Soaz Me, this is single target. It has a little bit of downtime, but he's doing 2.8 million. Kingsbane is up there and Venom is up there, right? Whereas a bleed build here on a single target fight, such as, the last boss. All right, this is a little bit of a longer fight. This is 322, this is 416. But you see here, Rupture is doing a lot, Crimson Tempest is doing a lot, and it's a little bit less. I don't know exactly why. What? Oh, they pulled ads on top. Okay, well, let's do this fight then. Yeah, so you see it a little bit lower. Envenom's doing a lot. They didn't cast Crimson Tempest. They should be casting Crimson Tempest. So this breakdown is a little bit scuffed, but you can sort of see the difference. Envenom's a lot lower. There's no second poison, etc., right? Envenom here is doing the mass of the lifting. Kingsbane is doing a lot of work, whereas you don't have that here. The numbers themselves, obviously a little bit scuffed. Don't mind too much. This is more single target, if only by a little bit. And you do focus on more poison stuff, right? Keep it conceptual. Then you have the legendary no Garrote build. Now, it trades in these Garrote talents for Twist the Knife, Amplifying Poison, right? Dashing Scoundrel. Goes full in on poisons, takes the additional Shiv charge, and then instead of taking the stealth stuff, because we're not taking Improved Garrote or Master Assassin, we're going Forced Induction Supercharger for the extra Shiv damage, right? This is a cleave setup. You're getting energy from Dashing Scoundrel, and then opting to not cleave Garrotes. So as you'll see in the breakdown here, Garrote is piss low. Garrote is dead. This is a dead button. He's keeping this up on single target because of lethal dose stacks and because of the extra energy. But in AoE, this button does absolutely nothing because without improved Garrote, Garrote is a fish without water. It sucks. It sucks real bad. You'll still see Rupture, right? He's cleaving Rupture. This is his main source of energy, so having Rupture up is important. Crimson Tempest is lacking a little bit, but again, that's not the focus. The main focus is really these chunky Envenoms and the big Caustic Spatter. You'll see even compared to the overall on a hybrid build, just a couple of talent swaps, and you're doing way more with Envenom, way more with Caustic Spatter. This fully leans into Envenom and Caustic Spatter. You'll also see Kingsbane up here, and on a single target fight, such as Rashanon, maybe, we do Speaker Dark Shadow Crown. There's a little bit of downtime on this one, but not nearly as much as Rashanon, so we'll do this one. You'll see Envenom's up there, Kingsbane's up there. We're doing a lot of nature damage with our hero talents, so this is a great stuff going on. Single target damage is really high. That is the point of this build, right? Putting everything, all of your eggs into Envenom and Caustic Spatter. Generally, people don't play this right now because bleed, for one, is easier. You get more out of it. But you also get this ridiculously high singular focus, which is helping your prio damage in AoE. So having giant singular focus in AoE is a huge benefit, which is why people are playing bleed. Versus here, it's doing a little bit less. You want to be kind of getting as much single target out of this as you can. There's also a lot of strategies involving pulling ads on top of bosses to get the funnel right now in high keys. So that is sort of where the meta is trending towards right now. But that's the difference in breakdowns. Rotationally, they're also a little bit different, but there's more minor differences, not really major differences. The same rules still apply, where you want to be spreading your bleeds, you want to be maintaining your Envenom, spamming Envenom for the Caustic Spatter damage, maintaining Crimson Tempest, right? All of that stuff still applies. You're still casting your cooldowns and your Kingsbanes and your Shivs and all that, just like you did in single target. You're stacking them up, lining up your cooldowns, all that fun stuff. Okay. Mythic plus rotation. I'm going to try my best to explain this, but I have to put asterisks every time I do anything regarding Mythic plus rotation, because I am not top 10 M+ world OP super giga IO score. And every time I say something about M+, there's always a small section of the community that goes, "Oh, but Whisper, you are not the goodest, most OP rogue in M+ ever. Why should I care?" I do the math, I do the sims. It's true, I don't push that hard. I'm not perfect, okay? However, everyone's gonna try and pick apart every little tiny minuscule thing that I'm about to say, no matter what I say. So the only advice I have is that you please ignore the GCD police, because these people are freaks. It's not that bad. You can mess up a couple times and your damage will not crater immensely. This is not something that, like, you can super duper fuck up, okay? It's not that bad. But there will be people out there telling you, "Oh, this tiny little nuance is wrong. Oh, this GCD here is wrong. Oh, this should have been a rupture. Oh, you pressed Garrote on accident in a no Garrote build. Ooh." Like, breathe. Calm down a little, okay? Just chill. So, the main differences, right? With a bleed build, you Crimson Tempest in a single target because it's better than an Envenom. You just maintain it, that's it. It's the only difference. You do want to spread Garrotes instead of Fan of Knives during Carnage. This includes all targets, even ones that will die fairly quickly. Obviously, if you have things that'll just instantly explode, like the tiny bees in Cinderbrew and Cindermead Brewery. Cinderbrew Meadery. I always get them mixed up. Cindermead Brewery? Cinderbrew Meadery? Hold on, now I can't sleep. Cinderbrew Meadery? Cinderbrew Meadery. Jesus Christ. But it's a brewery, right? It brews alcohol? I mean, I guess mead is also an alcohol. So, like, it is technically a meadery. But why is it Cinderbrew and not Cindermead? Wouldn't it be Cindermead because the bees are cinder? Like, they're cinder bees, right? Like, that's what their name is? So it'd be a Cindermead because you're making mead from the... And it's a brewery because that's where you're making the alcohol. Shouldn't it be the other way around? Am I dumb for this? This side thing. Is that stupid? That makes sense in my head, right? Why is it a Cinderbrew Meadery and not a Cindermead Brewery? Whatever. Point is, those tiny bees in that dungeon that I can't name, those explode legitimately instantly. You don't need to worry about spreading Garrotes to those. They will just simply explode, right? But anything that will last even a little bit longer than that, right? Like regular mobs, you should be spreading Garrote. An extra Rupture never hurt nobody. The baseline of Ruptures for Mythic Plus, you want at least 5 for Sense of Blood for that big 20% agility buff. If you throw out an extra Rupture on a bleed build, totally fine. Especially if the targets are going to live the full duration. An extra Rupture is like perfectly normal, perfectly okay. You'll get some extra energy out of it if you're not already capped, and like you'll get bonus Sanguine Blades uptime and big AoE, and it's fine. It's literally just fine. You can throw out an extra Rupture. It doesn't matter that much. In some situations, it's even better, especially if you can like get it to time where the mob dies and you get the snipe back and get some energy. It can be really good. Sanguine Blades is your bread and butter. Now, this is not an issue for bleed build whatsoever, because as you're spreading Garrotes and you're spreading Ruptures, you will have infinite energy, even through Sanguine Blades, even in Giga AoE. You need something like 35 targets or something like that in order to not keep up with Sanguine Blades on a regular opener. And even then, you can Vanish and spread more bleeds. So, the idea that you don't have Sanguine Blades up is ridiculous on a bleed build. You will always have it up. Now, Shiv is important. You don't have Kingsbane on a bleed build, right? You're doing this thing. You're doing this thing on the bottom half of the tree, bottom third. So we are shivving for Arterial. Now, in AoE, remember, Deathmark doesn't really do anything in AoE. So our only purpose is Arterial Precision to buff Kingsbane. Not Kingsbane, sorry. To buff Crimson Tempest. I'm getting a little tired. Crimson Tempest, AoE bleed. Arterial Precision, AoE Shiv that buffs bleeds. So you get Crimson Tempest up, and then you buff it with Arterial Precision, you press Shiv, you're good to go, right? Good to go. That's the whole purpose of the bleed build. Very straightforward, very simple. Okay. Piss baby easy. This is a build you can play with your goddamn eyes closed. I swear to God, it is so simple. I know that I say that Assassination is easy and a lot of people get scared off. But I promise you, if you just spread Garrotes, spread some Ruptures, press Crimson Tempest, and press Shiv, kaboom, you are doing so much damage. Especially because you don't really rely that much on Caustic Spatter. It's still good, but less so on compared to other builds. Spreading your bleeds is like 80% of the battle, right? Like, as long as you can find your Garrote, your Rupture, and your Crimson Tempest buttons, you're good to go. After that, find the biggest, fattest dude in the pack, maintain Caustic Spatter, and you're back to spamming Envenoms. It is so simple. You need to get it into your fingers a little bit. There is a little bit of obvious muscle memory that you need to learn with any class, any spec in the game, but bleed build, it does not get easier than this. Hybrid. This is awful to min-max, because you still want to spread Garrotes, you still have improved Garrote, you still have Master Assassin for the crit. However, you get all the benefits of hitting bleeds that you do with the bleed build, but your talents tell you to not do that, because now you're playing double poison, you're playing Kingsbane, you want Envenom uptime to buff your Kingsbane bleeds, right? So now you're not spreading bleeds during your Kingsbane so that you can Envenom more. It is a disaster. You still want your 5 Ruptures for Scent. This is a common theme, right? With Bleed, an extra one doesn't hurt, but with Hybrid and Forced Induction or Cleave builds, you want to get 5 Ruptures for Scent, and that is about it. The only exception is if you need more energy or you're sniping Ruptures for energy. But optimizing Hybrid is a headache in of itself. And all of the tiny sort of things that you need to do in order to get Hybrid to work just makes it kind of terrible. Forced Induction means big boy Envenom. So for Cleave builds, you are playing entirely around Envenom. You don't have an Incar, no improved Garrotes, no stealth Garrotes. That's not a problem. You're getting all of your energy from your 5 Ruptures, and you have Dashing Scoundrel talented in order to help with your energy. This makes it a little bit easy to play because you just need to get your Ruptures up. In some situations, you can press 1 Garrote, like in your opener on a target, and it'll automatically cleave. But in most of the situations, you don't want to use Garrote at all in AoE because it's just a dead button and you can press something better. However, there is an incredibly sweaty balance that you have to do between bleed and dashing. You don't have subterfuge, so you don't have a big window to cleave your ruptures. And once those ruptures drop, you need to still get energy somewhere, and Dashing Scoundrel is nowhere near enough on its own, obviously. So you still need to cleave your ruptures out, but you need to do that in a way that you are mindful of your prio target and your boss damage. So because Envenom is such a big button, you want to spend the least amount of time possible using ruptures, right? Now, it becomes problematic because if targets die in like 5 seconds, yes, you're sniping it, but you're also going to lose your Sense of Blood stack because it dies. And then you want the Sense of Blood stack for your bigger Envenoms, so then you need to rupture something else. So it becomes a big problem of like, I want to have ruptures out, but I don't want to press rupture. It's hard. Now, the other thing is that the Shiv rules are chopped as fuck. They are so chopped. Because you're playing Forced Induction, but you're not playing Arterial Precision, what ends up happening is that you want to AoE with Shiv, but the only AoE you're getting is Forced Induction. Now, this is fine in low target cleave, because you want to just press Shiv, get the Forced Induction out, and call it a day. In bigger AoE, pressing Shiv can be valuable, but it's mostly a prio damage thing for your bigger Envenoms, which does increase caustic damage, but there's very specific rules of like, if you're above, I believe, like 9 targets, you don't want to Shiv. And if you're above 5, you still want to Shiv. In general, you should still press Shiv, even if it's just forced induction, even if it's just prio damage. If you're playing a cleave build, you are probably playing it for the single target damage anyways, and you're trying your best to nuke the hell out of big targets. So in that situation, you should still Shiv. Like, you're playing a build that is revolving around your single target damage, you probably want to press Shiv. The prio damage isn't that much better specifically compared to bleed, which is why people are playing bleed. Specifically because you have all of this extra AoE that you're funneling back in through singular focus on Deathstalker. So that's why the Forced Induction cleave builds have kind of fallen out of favor. Now, I will show you on a bleed build, for example, how this would look like. Let me just set this up real quick. Yeah. Okay, cool. So, bleed build rotation, right, in AoE, very simple, very straightforward, as I already discussed, but let's see it in action. First things first, reapply the poisons. You only get 1 lethal, 1 non-lethal. And then you want to open with Ambush to get your Deathstalker's mark up. However, since you're playing Subterfuge, you can delay this. So you can, for example, do it now. And then get your Rupture. The Bone Spikes go out. You get your Crimson Tempest. Get your Caustic Spatter up. And you're just doing it. This is your rotation. You're already in it. It's the same thing. So now you Envenom, right? You Envenom. Get your combo points. Press your Shiv. Maintain Crimson Tempest. Get up your bleeds again. And you're doing it. You're literally doing it. It's just this, right? It's just this. This is all you're doing. It's very straightforward. Again, Darkest Night takes priority every time. So you want a Darkest Night. Now it's fine to let your Crimson Tempest drop a little bit. Go back up. Crimson Tempest is up. Your bleeds are up. So you're going to press Shiv. Always press Shiv in AoE. Maintain Caustic Spatter. Maintain Garrote on your target. Now, as the ruptures start falling off, you will want to refresh them. You'll see that I'm running out of energy here. So I'm going to kaboom, just to get them back up. I personally tab. Again, if you want to be sweaty, you can do mouse overs. But I'm just going to tab over real quick. And then we can just go Shiv again, because Crimson Tempest is ticking. So we can just Shiv. Get everything back up. Refresh our Crimson Tempest, and this is just how you're going to go about your day, right? This is just standard rotation. Keep up all of your debuffs. GG. The same is true for every build. I can show you the exact polar opposite here, which would be the no garrote build. So we're just going to quickly swap over if it lets me change talents. Bum, bum, bum. Please. The one awkward thing here. Hello? Okay, well, we need to wait a little bit for Without a Trace to be off cooldown. Now, if you are encountering the same problem that I am here, where you're stuck in combat with a target dummy, that is because Serrated Bone Spike is a permanent dot, and it will keep you in combat unless you run really far away. In Dornegal, usually I try to run a little bit further away down the stairs around the weird crossroads. Here I can just kind of run back to here. Once the target dummies have despawned, you're good to go. So again, swapping to a cleave build, you get 2 poisons. So now let's apply both of our poisons. But rotationally, it's going to be roughly the same thing, right? We're going to ambush from stealth. We don't have subterfuge, so we have to ambush from stealth. And then we're going to get our bleeds up. So I'm going to garrote here once just to get it up on my main target. And now we're already going to prep into our big burst phase here. So big burst with our Kingsbane. Our garrote is buffing our Kingsbane. And we're going to try our best to get this Kingsbane super pumped up, right? Caustic Spatter is our main thing. Now our Kingsbane's done, our burst is over. We are vibing. We're going to get Darkest Night up, and then we're going to start going through it and refreshing our ruptures, all that fun stuff, right? So rupture here. We want to rupture here. And then we're going to rupture this one as well for our Scent of Blood stacks. Get up Crimson Tempest, all that sort of stuff. Obviously not the most perfect showcase, but trying to show you how it's supposed to work, right? Obviously, as you equip actual gear instead of testing gear, it'll be a little bit smoother. As you'll have more targets, it'll be a little bit smoother. You'll be cleaving better with Indiscriminate Carnage and your Vanishes and all that. So, all good. Same rotation, however. It's pretty much the same. Single target wise, it's also very similar. So no issues there. You're just getting your bleeds up, spamming Venom. Cooldown phases are cooldown phases. Good to go. That's sort of it. However, here we go with the big list. Before we start, these are semi-estimates. They're not exactly perfect. But there are a ton of min-maxes. Now, I'm going to say that other random junk is not included here. There's stuff like low combo point ruptures, fan of knives to delay Fatebound coins. These aren't in sims, and fundamentally, we don't sim for mistakes. We sim for rotational knowledge. So keep that in mind when I'm talking about all of these. However, you'll see a bunch of min-maxes here and their optimizations. And I'm going to go through them one by one. So, starting with Deathstalker and Dry Shiving. What is a Dry Shiv? You've heard this term probably, you've seen it perhaps in the Wowhead guide. A Dry Shiv is pretty simple. I'm going to just slam a Deathmark here. So, Dry Shiving is when you have the Lingering Darkness buff here after your Deathmark expires. So you'll see after this expires, 3, 2, 1, you get this 30-second buff. While you have this 30-second buff, you're dealing increased nature damage. And so if you have a Darkest Night and this increased nature damage buff, you want to Shiv now outside of your cooldowns in order to buff this Darkest Night. And that Envenom will hit like a truck. It's a guaranteed crit, which does increased damage, especially with the tier set bonus, right? You're going to be doing 60% stronger Lingering Darkness, so 48%. It's going to be a 96% Darkest Night. This Envenom is going to hit like a truck. We call it a Dry Shiv because it's not attached to cooldowns. It's dry in the middle of your rotation. So in single target especially, that is a pretty decent sizable chunk, 0.7%. You have Crimson Tempest in single target. We went over this briefly with a bleed build. Crimson Tempest in single target is very good because it's better than an Envenom. Not corroding an AoE depends on your build. However, not corroding an AoE with a cleave build is very important. However, this varies based on your target count, based on exactly the talents that you're taking. There's certain variants that you can do. So, no corroding an AoE is important. It is a min-max that you need to keep in mind when you're playing stuff with no improved corrode. However, it varies based on the target counts. This could be anywhere from inconsequential to like 3, 4, 5%, right? Shiv and AoE situations. This depends on build. We also kind of went over this. When you have Arterial Precision, pressing Shiv for bleed damage with Crimson Tempest is an important part of it. It is about 1%. Just shiving for Supercharger, Forced Induction stuff is a little bit less important, but depending on target count, it can be anywhere from 0.3 to like 1.5%. Especially in cleave situations, the Forced Induction combo point is important. Shiving, obviously, for Kingsbane is important if you have prio target that you want to hit. If you have Arterial Precision and Kingsbane for some reason, like in a raid build, you get a lot of extra Caustic Spatter damage out of it because the Shiv is increasing the damage of Caustic Spatter. So keep that in mind as well. There are a lot of stuff with shiving and AoE. Most of them revolve around if you have Arterial Precision, it increases bleed damage and Caustic Spatter damage on the targets that are getting hit. If you have Forced Induction, you're shiving for Forced Induction in low target cleave. And obviously with Kingsbane, you want to shiv in AoE for the Kingsbane damage. Even though it does not increase Caustic Spatter directly, it is increasing the prio damage that you're dealing through Kingsbane, right? In order to increase the damage of Caustic Spatter, your Shiv needs to be on the target that is taking the Caustic Spatter damage. So keep that in mind, but there are a lot of situations, a lot of permutations here, but Shiv in AoE, important to think about. It varies per build, could be anywhere from 1% to like 4%. T optimizations. I say there's no gain. A lot of people look at T and they want to avoid drinking it automatically when you hit below 30 energy. They want to only use it during Deathmark. They want to only use it during Kingsbane. Simulations have found that simply macroing it to Shiv, letting it auto-proc, not really that much of a difference compared to trying to optimize around it, play around it, avoid auto-procking it. None of it really matters. We've checked these numbers over the seasons. They keep getting worse and worse. Trying to force T just simply isn't worth your time. So playing around T, no gain. Supercharger combo points. This is also a question we get a lot. Because you have 2 additional or 3 additional combo points on your Envenom, what you can do technically is you can just finish with 2 combo points. So like right here, I have Supercharger, I have 2 combo points, and I can Envenom now, and it counts as a 5 combo point finisher. So the question we always get is that worth it? Or if you're on like 5 combo points and you have Darkest Nights, do I still need to build to 7? The answer is it doesn't matter. Because combo points and damage per combo point is linear, you are spending the same amount of combo points on your finishers at the end of the day, and they're doing the same amount of damage per combo point. So just consuming the bonus combo points is fine. I personally always make the recommendation that you should just get into the habit of always finishing on 5, or if you have Darkest Night up, you should finish on 7, the maximum combo points. Just get into the habit and do it automatically. That way you can just fully ignore your Supercharger combo points and it doesn't matter. So that's my opinion. If you want to do it the other way around, if that makes more sense to you, do it like that. It does not make a difference. Then you have Fan of Knives in single target. This is something that has popped up specifically for Deathstalker with Clear the Witnesses. With Clear the Witnesses up, you would want to Fan of Knives in single target as long as you're not using Vicious Venoms. Vicious Venoms obviously increases the damage of Ambush and Mutilate by a ton, so with a raid build, you would not Clear the Witnesses or Fan of Knives in single target. In an M+ build, you would. Now, I listed this as 0.5%. Depending on the build, this can actually be more or less, depending on if you have Blindside and a Bleed build, or if you're playing a Cleave setup that doesn't have any Mutilate talents at all. This varies a little bit, but for the most part, you are only using it in single target in Mythic Plus builds. In regular builds, otherwise you would use it on 2 targets. This has no fall off damage, right? This is just flat damage to every target it hits. So you should be using this anytime there's adds up. Just use the proc, does a lot of damage, gives you an extra combo point, good value. Let's go down to Rupture Sniping. Now, I spoke previously about Rupture Sniping a little bit. I've kind of danced around it. But if an enemy dies while afflicted by a Rupture, you get energy back based on the remaining duration. This is equal to 10 energy per 2 seconds, or 5 energy per second remaining on Rupture. The reason why this is important is because, especially in like raids or boss fights in Mythic Plus, you'll have adds up that die very quickly. You can still hit these with a Rupture, and if you hit them with a Rupture and they die, you get a bunch of energy back. That is worth doing, and it is very powerful because it is bugged and doing more than intended. So this can be anywhere from 2 to 4% depending on the fight, depending on how often you're getting adds, where in the rotation you're getting adds. For example, if the adds are only spawning during your Deathmark windows, Deathmark gives you energy back because it's duplicating your bleeds, so Rupture Sniping becomes worse naturally. If it's always during downtime when you're off the boss anyways, you're not doing anything with the energy, that's a problem. If you are Rupture Sniping adds frequently and you're making good use of the energy and you're able to keep up a cadence where you're never running out of energy and you're always using it to spam more and more Envenoms, it can be very good. So depending on the fight, this can be anywhere from 2 to 4%. In like super ideal conditions, it could be up to 6%. It is very, very strong. You should be Rupture Sniping. Then we have a bunch of Fatebound stuff. So we have Fatebound pre-Shiv, you have Vanishing for Fatebound, you have Avoiding Rupture in Cold Blood. All of this is, not that's Minecraft. All of this is related to Fatebound related things, so mostly single targets for the raid fights. I'm going to quickly swap over and show you guys what that would look like. But for the most part, it should be fairly intuitive if you understand the hero talents, if you understand the rotations. So, for example, the first one is Vanishing for Fatebound that we talked about, and I have this listed as around 3%. That is because it is incredibly important to get the extra flip from Double Jeopardy. Without the extra flip from Double Jeopardy, you run the risk of not actually getting your flip. So for example here, right, if I don't vanish, what ends up happening is I get to 5, 6, and then 7, right? But I'm now missing a flip. If I were to vanish now, I'm getting 8, 9, but I'm not getting an edge case flip. And because the stacks are so high, right, these tails coins and these heads coins are incredibly strong. So not getting the extra flip from Double Jeopardy is a huge, huge loss. This is your main burst, and Fatebound has a lot of it. So getting the extra flip is incredibly important, even without any other stealth talents. Make sure you vanish. Then you have some other stuff. Fatebound pre-Shiv, this is something that my muscle memory doesn't even have. But with the tier set bonus, your Kingsbane flips 2 edge case coins and your Deathmark flips 2 edge case coins. So before you go into your Deathmark rotation, you actually want to Shiv beforehand. So just imagine that I have Deathmark up. I want to Shiv here, then Deathmark, then Kingsbane. That buffs the damage from the coins, and then you would Shiv afterwards during your Deathmark as per normal. But getting the extra nature damage buff on the coins that are coming out is a decent sized gain. That's about 0.4%. And then you have the important Avoiding Rupture. Now, this shouldn't happen normally in your rotation. However, if I were to just set this up real quick and then start yapping a little as if I've been doing anything else for this entire day, you'll notice that as my cooldowns come up and I have Inevitable end, it says that the coins flipped by Envenom are guaranteed to match the same outcome as last flip, right? So during my cooldowns, I want to match Edge Case by flipping with Envenom. Now, what would be the problem if I were to Rupture instead? Well, let's find out. So if you were to do a normal rotation, pre-Shiv, Deathmark, Kingsbane, and then you're like, oh shit, my Rupture's running out, I need a Rupture, and you Rupture, well, you lose your Edge Case, and now you screwed up your entire opener. This naturally doesn't happen. Like, you shouldn't really be running into this, but there are edge cases where it does. So that's about 0.5% in sims. This can be much bigger if you're constantly messing it up, but again, you don't really mess it up if you're playing normally. So not that much to avoid, but make sure you are avoiding pressing Rupture during Cold Blood. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just the big ones. There are some tiny stuff that I'm probably forgetting at this point. There's, like, for example, pooling before a Kingsbane. So whenever a Kingsbane is about to come up, you don't want to be completely dry on energy because you do want to Envenom beforehand. Starting to lose my voice a little bit. So you would, like, want to get to about half energy before you get into your Kingsbane here. Usually the rule is about 3 seconds. 3-4 seconds, you want to get to about half. That is good enough for most situations. So pooling a little bit of energy before your Kingsbanes is good, but it's not really all that impressive. It's about 0.2, 0.3%. Trying to think if there's anything else minor that I can think of. But I think that covers basically all of it. There's a lot more in, like, super niche M+ things that we could discuss. But there's so many situations to cover, and, like, each situation is unique in its own regard that I can't really make any blanket statement, which makes recommending min-maxes in, like, M+ AoE situations difficult. So I'm not going to do that. So let's continue on. This is why you guys piss me off. Okay? I got a bone to pick with you guys. Part of this is Mr. Shindig. This is the bone I have to pick with you. Last season, there was a lot of talk about the Sims being cooked and not being able to trust what stats you take for bleed build, for cleave build, for raid, for whatever. And there was kind of this, like, big scare and this big panic that Sims were incorrect. So I want to come straight ahead and come clean. The Sims were incorrect. But the Sims were incorrect in specifically Patchwerk AoE, which is something that I do not recommend simming. And I'm going to go over why I don't recommend simming that in the next slide somewhere. For now, though, I want to trigger you guys a little bit and say that your secondary stats don't mean shit. For a bleed build, it is true that haste is a little bit more important because bleeds are doing a lot of your damage. Increasing the tick rate of your bleeds is important. But for the most part, all of these boil down to basically just all damage. If you crit more, you're going to be doing more damage. You're going to be getting more combo points, which is more buttons to press. That's more damage. Mastery affects basically everything on your spec. That's more damage. Haste gives you more energy, more bleed ticks. That's basically more damage. Verse is more damage. All of these boil down to basically the same thing, and their niche where they, like, live in is not strong enough to carry. So, like, a lot of people will be like, oh, haste increases energy, so it's so important. Yeah, but not really. Like, you wouldn't build haste specifically to increase energy. You wouldn't build crit specifically to increase crit and, like, get more combo points. That's not something you do. So I have 2 sims here, and I simmed every ring, every belt, and I recrafted my wrist to every stat. All in one sim, right? So you have every combination of ring, belt, and wrist recraft. I have one here. This is single target with Fatebound. And I just want you to take a look. I did a replace all on the gems because I'm not going to bother resimming gems. So this is Giga optimized. This is replacement, so we're going to take this. Now I want you to look. I want you to look at this, and I want you to take in how many profiles there are that are within like 0.2%, okay? So again, each one of these lines has a difference with it. Some of these are recrafting a dagger, some of these are recrafting wrists, some of these are changing the belts. You'll see some crit mast here, some crit haste. This is crit mast again. Crit mast, crit mast. This one has crit verse. This is haste verse. No one would ever craft haste verse, but guess what? It sims about equal. Here you have verse mastery, crit haste, a crit haste again, right? Here you have a crit mastery ring with a verse mastery ring. Here you have a crit mastery ring with a verse mastery ring, but in a different way because this is mastery prio, this is verse prio. Anyways, every ring this season, every belt this season, and every recraft, right? Let's scroll down. That's 3 slots. 0.1. 0.1. 0.1. Still 0.1. There's some cooked shit in here if you take a look, right? A haste verse crafts again. 0.2. Not that bad. We're still going. We're still going. We're still going. 0.2. 0.2. It's all 0.2. Everything's 0.2. Oh my god. So many combinations. 0.2. 0.2. Oh, the first 0.3. Look at how far I had to scroll to get something that was less, that was like more of a loss than 0.2. Look at this. Look at all of this. Look at this, dude. I simmed 3 slots and I made like 150 combinations that are basically this. Obviously ignoring the gems, right? Here's the thing. I can make more combinations if I simmed gems, right? Imagine you had your optimal gems. Imagine you had a crit damage gem here, and this is enchanting crit verse, right? There's 3 crit verse, 4 crit verse, 5 crit verse gems, and mastery enchants. So what if I took one of these at random, right? Like this one. And this one has haste verse, and this is a verse ring. So instead of crit verse gems, or crit mast gems, swapping out the gems and enchants that I have on my gear would improve these profiles, right? Like, these profiles would get better if I swapped out gems and optimized my gems and enchants for this stat. So, not only do I have this many combinations that are basically equal by simming only 3 slots out of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 slots available that aren't tier or bonus items or trinkets, right? I have 7 slots that aren't those. I could change the gems in my cloak. I could change the gems in my rings, in my belt, in my neck, in my wrist. I could change the enchants on my rings from mastery to other stats, right? There's so many ways for me to slightly change the stats on all of my gear that all of this shit could be improved even further and made even closer to BIS. Hell, look at how many 0.3% there are. Optimizing my gems here is 0.3%. So what do you think would happen if I optimized my gems on these 0.3%? 0.3, 0.3, 0.3, 0.3, 0.3. Everything's 0.3. Everything's 0.3. Oh, there's a 0.4. All of these profiles are basically equivalent, right? We can agree on that. If I optimized gems, if I optimized enchants, if I swapped around another piece or 2 of gear, these would all be essentially best in slot. They are so close. Everything here is incredibly close. That's why I'm always hounding people for, oh, it's not best in slot. Fuck you mean it's not best in slot? Are you kidding me? I'm recrafting with haste verse and it's pretty much equivalent. Like, what are you talking about? This has an error margin of plus or minus 2,700. That's 5,000 DPS that you can swing, right? My haste verse stupid fucking dagger here is 4,000 DPS away. It's within margin of error. This is within margin of error, and I have a dagger equipped that none of you would craft in your life. You would never go out of your way to be like, oh, you know what this dagger needs? A haste verse missive. Stop it. Like, I have been crafting my embellishments without missives for an expansion and a half. It does not matter. It does not matter. It does not matter. Get it in. It does not matter. Bislists don't matter. Stats don't matter. It doesn't matter. Get it in. But if you think that that's not bad enough, I have Dungeonslice. Surely this matters in AoE, right? You can already see I have whatever. But surely in a dungeon setup with a dungeon build, this matters, right? Let's fucking do it. Let's do it, right? All of these are equal. The highlighted ones are just straight up equal. It's the same sim. Rings, boots, not boots, belt, wrist, recraft, right? And they're all active 2 is all the same talents. I just swapped the talent. This is active 2. It's all the same talent build. Okay, let's go. Equal, side grade. It's all side grades. Okay, 0.1, 0.1, 0.2, 0.2, 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. It's all 0.2. Oh, 0.3. Look at this, dude. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It does not matter. And if you optimize the gems again, it would be the same thing. Please. I do this video where I rant about gear like multiple times a season and people still don't get it and they still ask me, oh, do I take this because it's BIS? To someone out there, I hope to God you look at this and it finally clicks in your brain. It doesn't matter. And if you are a person who has had this click in your brain and you have people who don't get it, link them this timestamp and have them click. I need the community as a whole to come together for everyone's collective sanity. Maybe one day we can finally get rid of BIS lists because they are so dumb and they mislead people. That's it. That's all I want. That's all I want to do about it. You guys piss me off. It doesn't matter at all. It's all damage. Okay. Sim. More sims. I'm going to go over what we're simming and why we're simming it. This is where the shindig thing comes back into play. I'm going to talk about single target. Single target is very simple, and then we're going to talk about dungeons. Okay. Single target sims. Obviously, top gear, you can do whatever the hell you want. However, the real juice that we're going to talk about is down here. If you've never simmed before, super TLDR. As you select items, you get more combinations. So it'll sim all of these wrists, for example, against my current gear. It'll sim all of these belts against my current gear. It'll sim all of these rings against my current gear. You can hit replace existing gems in a chance, and then select the enchants that you want to compare, the gems that you want to compare. If you sim gems, this will take an eternity because they're all super close in DPS value. So usually don't bother simming gems unless you're super trying to min-max, get that last 0.3%. Just be aware this might take hours, especially if you're simming like AoE dungeon stuff. This will take hours. Okay. If you want to compare talents, you can do it via this. Right-click removes the talent. You can add it here. Hit save. Now you have a talent. If you want to compare a bunch of talents at once, generate combinations. Now it'll put this talent wherever it can. So it'll put it here, 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 here. If you don't want to include a talent, such as Indiscriminate Carnage, right-click it. Now you don't. Now it's gone, right? It goes 9 talent combinations, now it's 8. Now it's 7. Now it's 6. Now it's 5. And you can throw this back, right? All the way back. You can go all the way, and now it's going to have an insane amount of combinations. But you're like, okay, I don't want any of these talents. It'll put the talents where it wants. Cool. For a single target, you want to be simming Patchwerk 1 boss 5 minutes. This is going to be a very clean, very sterile environment. It's basically a raid boss for 5 minutes. You can hit optimal raid buffs here. That way you have all of your raid buffs active. This is mostly for a comparison points to other Assassination Rogue sims, because most of this won't change recommendations. Like, you won't have... like, if I turn off, for example, Mystic Touch, which is the monk debuff, it's not going to change the recommendations of, like, gear or talent or anything. You still play the same stuff. So this is mostly just numerical. However, if you are like, oh, why is my sim so low, and you don't have raid buffs on, that's probably why. So optimal raid buffs here, it's all set up SimC defaults, perfect. If you want to sim some ads, however, there is a couple options, and they are increasingly jank. So the one that I would personally recommend is Cleave Ad. What this does is it's a single ad that is up 60% of the fight. The number of bosses here doesn't change the ad count, it just changes the bosses. So if you do like 5 boss Cleave Ad, you'd have 5 targets with a 6th target up 60% of the time. Now, I don't super recommend this because there's no fight that really goes with this timing. And the only thing it'll really recommend is that you take Caustic Spatter instead of Internal Bleeding, right? That's the only thing it'll really recommend, Caustic Spatter over Internal Bleeding. So, in general, simming AoE doesn't really make sense for us in that regard for raids, because in any situation where we have AoE, our solution is simply talent Internal Bleeding. Which is why we always just stick with Patchwerk 1 boss. This optimizes your single target DPS, and you're good to go. You should always use latest, by the way. Using latest is just simply the most accurate, because things get added to simulations all the time, and so you want to be on the latest version. If you do weekly, it only builds Mondays, so you can be a full week behind on Simcraft updates. So, in my recommendation, always use latest. Otherwise, you can just hit sim, you're good to go. Now, for the good old Mythic Plus, there's a lot of things you can do here. I actually have this written out in my presentation. Dungeonslice is the one that I recommend for Assassination. It is the one that we optimize for the most. It is the one that we recommend the most. And there's a lot of reasons why we do that. We don't recommend AoE Patchwerk. If you're going to sim Dungeonslice, don't do it with all the raid buffs active, because it just makes it a mess, and your numbers will be inflated, and then you're going to be sad. And then you can sim AoE Patchwerk with caveats, and then I'll show you Dungeonroute, which is a new up-and-coming sim that is very, very... well, it's not new, but it is very situational, and I will not guarantee that it sims properly. Okay, so Dungeonslice. What is the Dungeonslice? If you come down here, you'll see Dungeonslice, and it overrides the fight to 1 boss in 6 minutes, right? It's a 6-minute slice of a dungeon fight. It is a 2-minute boss, followed by alternating small and large packs. Why is that important? Dungeonslice is important for a couple reasons. The first reason why it's important is because as rogues, we want re-stealths, even though I keep saying we don't. Re-stealthing is a damage increase for us. Chain pulling is a damage increase if done properly, because you get more uptime on mobs. They both have their own merits. We have things like Indiscriminate Carnage, right? The Capstone. So stealthing gives us benefits. Dungeonslice handles it all. There's a lot of variance built into Dungeonslice. So you'll get your boss fight, you'll get small cleave, you'll get big AoE, you'll get chain pulls, you'll get re-stealths. It is a mixture of a little bit of everything all in one pile. Now, even though this is not a M+ dungeon and the number it spits out at the end isn't indicative of like actual dungeon damage that you should be doing, the situations that Dungeonslice presents to your character and uses to simulate your character are the most accurate that you can get right now, bar none. It is just simply the most realistic thing we have, and even though it has a bunch of flaws, there isn't really something better that we can use. So when Shindig says that he doesn't really trust Dungeonslice, Hi Shindig. Where he says that the AoE Patchwerk sims are cooked. Yes, they're cooked, but they're cooked because they are simply worse models that are not being supported, right? If you sim, for example, AoE, people do this all the time. They're like, I'm gonna sim 5 bosses, patchwork 1 minute 30. What you're essentially doing is you're saying, I am simming a single pack of mobs with all of my cooldowns up and Bloodlust. You can turn Bloodlust off. But I'm simming 1 pack of 5 mobs. They die at the same time. I have all of my cooldowns. I have 2 Vanish charges. I have all of that stuff. Everything. Like, I'm going fresh into a dungeon. And I'm simming this 1 pack. That doesn't make sense, right? It makes sense in the context of how do I optimize the damage on a single pack in a single dungeon. But that's not how you optimize M+, right? By definition, things like the Cleave build exist because you're optimizing for a certain part of a dungeon. Like, you're optimizing for a boss, but you still want to do AoE, obviously, right? If you're just optimizing for single target, you would just run a raid build in M+. But you don't do that, because inherently, you already know that re-stealthing is important. You already know that you're getting extra damage from Carnage. You already know that you're holding Vanish charges, right? You're not going to blow all your Vanish charges on 1 pack. So simming a very, very small section of a dungeon, such as like a 5-minute patch, 1 minute 35 boss patchwork, simply doesn't make sense. It's good to have as a comparison point, and it's okay if you want to use it as like just like an idealized thing, but you can't use it to recommend things in dungeons. Statistically, it just doesn't make sense. Like, just from a data perspective, the data you're getting out of doing a sim like this is not relevant to the success of your dungeon, right? So that's why I haven't supported Patchwork AoE in a long time. However, I have heard your cries, and I have heard your whines, and I have heard your screams and your bitching. And I fixed Patchwork AoE. It's not perfect. It's not going to be 100% accurate for every single talent build, because there are like 15 fucking talent builds that people play. It's not going to be accurate for every single situation, every single talent combo, every single target counts, every single fight length. It's impossible. I'm going to be real with you. If you were expecting to be able to sim 20 combinations of talents with both hero talents and then go through and go 1 boss, 2 boss, 3 boss, 5, 7, 9, 10, 8, like, if you want to sim all of these in a row and then go like, oh, what if it's a 30 second? What if it's a 40 second? What if it's 3 minutes? It's not possible. The work required to have all of the logical checks to make that accurate is simply unbearable. Assassination is too complicated and has too many small, tiny min-maxes. It is not reasonable to, like, try and assume or try and expect sims to be able to perfectly model all of those situations every time perfectly. It can't be done. So, Patchwork sims, they are better. You can use them, just be aware of the insane pitfalls that you're running into when you're using them, but I have fixed them. They are better. In some situations, up to 20% better. So, yes, they were cooked. Yes, they were bad. They were bad on purpose for a reason. That reason being, I think it's stupid to sim this. However, enough of you guys cried about it that I went in and I fixed it because people are going to keep using it, and I might as well make it at least like 90% of the way there. That being said, if you're listening to this, I would expect and hope that you don't use Patchwork AoE. Okay. With that being said, Dungeonroute. What is Dungeonroute? How do you use Dungeonroute? Now, this is very experimental. And we don't optimize for Dungeonroute. In theory, optimizing for Dungeonslice should mean that Dungeonroute is automatically optimized, because they are very similar. However, there are important differences with Dungeonslice and Dungeonroute that I will go over, which makes me not recommend Dungeonroute and makes me hesitant to recommend it to other people. However, just like the caveat of Patchwerk AoE being bad, I think that there is merit in using Dungeonroute sparingly in order to make subtle differences and comparisons between certain things. So, I'm going to show you how to set up Dungeonroute. I'm going to tell you what it does, why you can use it, and why you shouldn't. Okay, so the first thing that you need is you need to go to Wago and do Dungeonroute. Dungeonroute. Mythic Dungeon Tool? No. Dungeonroute. MDT Sim. Here we go. I will leave this in the description, so you guys can go find it yourself. It goes over what it does, so you can read this if you want, but this is a Weakauras that you will need, and you will also need an add-on, not this, called Mythic Dungeon Tools. This one, MDT, Mythic Dungeon Tools. Then, let's go into game. You have MDT. Now, I already set this up with a generic route. It doesn't really matter what the route is, but you have to set up a route. Now, this is an order. You might have seen this linked in chat, so we're going to go purple, then we're going to go teal, red, blue, yellow, pink, cyan, orange. Then we're going to go down here, dark blue, lime, pink, green, red, right? Like, that's the route that we're taking with all these mobs. If you have this set up, and you have the Weakauras installed, what you can do is you can specify a mob health percent. This is the percent of damage that you are doing in the party. 27, 25 is usually fine, somewhere in that range. And then you can say SimC export route, and it'll give you this nonsense. This absolute gibberish is basically the setup of the dungeon, right? Now, notably, you have to set the dungeon level as well, because it will scale the health. So if you're wanting to do a 20, do it on a 20, export it, and it'll change the keystone level. Now, this is basically every pull, right? So pull 11, no bloodlust, with a little bit of delay before the pull. You have all of these mobs. That's the gibberish. The way you use this is first you get your SimC, just like normal. And then you're going to go into your Top Gear, and you're going to hit SimC Expert Mode. It's going to open this up. Now, this specifically needs to be put into the footer. The Dungeonslice stuff needs to be put into the footer. So your SimC, as per normal, goes in the top, right? Your Dungeonslice stuff is going into the footer. Dungeonroute, my bad. So MDT, we're going to export, copy that, put it in the footer. This will now simulate Dungeonroute. You're simulating this specific route of this dungeon, right? Now, there are some caveats to this, and some issues. Remember how I said that Dungeonslice has variance based on like target counts? It does more pull, more ads, less ads, chain pulls, re-stealths, all of that together. That creates different timings, that creates different pull amounts, and statistically that creates variance, which helps create nice data. We like variance in statistics because variance helps us make sure that we don't have any isolated results, outliers on the top end or the bottom end, or local maximas or minimas where things are optimized to specific situations that aren't relevant in other situations, right? That's why we use stuff like Dungeonslice and Patchwerk Single Target, because those are very nice grounding sort of environments for us to test things in. Dungeonroute, because it sims the entire dungeon, it is a 45-minute sim. I don't mean that like in real life. I mean the sim itself is like 45 minutes in combat time. What this means is if you add variance to a dungeon route sim, it takes an eternity. It's just not possible, and there's a limitation on the compute power that we have available to us in order to sim that. It just can't be done. So the way that they get around it with Dungeon Route is they sim it without variance. So let's say you do this pull, and you end up at boss 9 with 13 minutes and 20 seconds to go, right? 13 minutes, 20 seconds to go in your timer. What ends up happening is every time you simulate, every fight that it simulates, you will get to this boss at 13 minutes and 20 seconds. Every single time. There's no variance. There's no getting here slower. There's no getting here faster. The mobs take X amount of time to die, and they will always take X amount of time to die. There's no variance in that. These all die when they die. It's the same every fight. So you get really weird timing stuff. We tested this back a while ago. I say we, Rogue theory crafting as a whole. And there's stuff like Upper Karazhan, where there's the chess event, which has a lot of downtime. And just the downtime from the chess event was skewing dungeon route sims so heavily that it would affect the way that you would want to use your trinkets. It wanted you to just like slam trinkets randomly in ways that made absolutely no sense, but it increased overall DPS slamming it for like no reason at all because you would not lose casts to the chess event. Now you can argue that that's a good way to play. However, you don't know that you're going to get to the chess event with a timing that makes sense with that, right? For all you know, you get to the chess event and the timing lines up perfectly, right? If you get to this boss in 10 minutes, your cooldowns line up if you've been slamming them on cooldown. What if you didn't, though? Dungeon Route can't handle that. It doesn't understand. It doesn't know. It doesn't have variance. Variance is an important part to making sure that our simulations are accurate. So the fact that Dungeon Route stuff gets you to the same target, the same pull, every single time with the same stuff means that you're never getting an accurate portrayal of how a dungeon will actually be run. What if your, teammate dies? What if your tank dies, gets a res, you don't wipe, but now you're slower, right? What if you pop cooldowns on a pull and then realize, oh shit, we overkilled a mob really, really hard. Now we don't have cooldowns on this pull. What if your teammates are doing less damage? What if your teammates are doing more damage? Nothing about Dungeon Route will be able to accurately portray that. And that is the core downside to Dungeon Route. It creates an insane landmine that you can step on at any time. If you change the route even slightly, all of a sudden you're doing like 10% more damage. Why? Because your cooldowns lined up just that slightly bit better, and it cascaded throughout the entire timings of the dungeon. All the timings of the dungeon, it cascaded the entire way through, because there's no variance. So you can use this to simulate dungeons against each other. If you want to simulate a Floodgate, or a Priory, or a Dawnbreaker, and you want that comparison, go for it. You can see some big level stuff. Like, for example, Gambit, this has a lot of AoE. Streets, not so much, right? You can see Echo Dome Aldani, this might have a lot of AoE, but if you do tiny pulls, right, you can compare tiny pulls, tiny pulls, tiny pulls. If you go super slow, right, you can compare that to something where, like, instead, like, whoop-de-doo, we're doing all of this at once. Like, we're doing all this at once. You can compare that, and you can see the differences in builds, roughly. Now, in Shindig's words, the Sims are cooked for this. This is not something we optimize for, and I'm going to get ahead of it this time and say, this is not a supported fight style. If you see weird things in Dungeon Route with your route with a certain talent build, I don't care. Don't bother me with it. I'm not gonna fix it. These things will happen because that is what Dungeonroute is. Okay? It is useful to use as a tool to compare things like Giga AoE dungeons versus tiny AoE dungeons, and maybe get some information out of that on how to play it differently, or swap some talents around if possible. But do not come crying to me when the sim looks really fucking whack. Because it will. I'm telling you right now, it will be whack. Guarantee. That is a whisper stamp of guarantee that your sim will be whack. However, if that's what you want to do, now you know how to do it. Okay. So, coming up on the end, rounding the bases, 3 hours later, we're going to compare Fatebound Deathstalker. We already went over this in some sections. I just want to make this crystal clear. Fatebound, awful AoE. Terrible. It actively gets worse with more targets. However, it has huge burst that rivals the subburst. It's super passive and easy. You macro basically everything, so you don't have to think. And you get to target swap, which is a great thing to do in raid fights, especially. It has great single target as well, but there's no defensives on it, right? We went over the talents for Fatebound. We saw that there's basically no defensive value. And without the tier, it doesn't feel like shit, right? If you look at the Fatebound tier set, Edge Case on Kingsbane feels great, right? You're playing around Edge Case, that is your main thing that you're rotationally changing. Increased Kingsbane duration is something you feel, and increased Kingsbane damage is where a lot of your burst comes from. So the increased duration and the Edge Case flipping, those are your two core rotational things that you will feel. The 4 set is when you have the Capstone, which is, again, guaranteed. Your cooldown of Deathmark goes down by 30 seconds, and your Kingsbane cooldown goes down by 15 seconds. So it's 45 second, 90 second. Now, the thing about this is something you'll feel. It doesn't change any priority, though. It doesn't really change anything. So you'll feel it, but rotationally it's all the same. The bad thing about this is without feeling the extra duration on Kingsbane, without flipping the extra coins, without having the cooldown reduction, Fatebound is the lukewarm tap water of hero talents. There is nothing that makes you feel cool. There is nothing that you will notice rotationally. It is nothing. It just goes straight past you. Deathstalker, on the other hand, you have insane Giga Prio in AoE. This is through singular focus. However, it is slightly cringe to play because of the mark, so keep that in mind. Target swapping is difficult. The mark is difficult to play around sometimes. You have huge AoE. Half of the hero talent is basically just AoE. However, the single target is pretty bad compared to Fatebound. You have a little bit lower burst. However, the burst goes up with the tier set because you get that big Giga Darkest Night in the middle of your cooldowns, right? You have the Shiv duration being increased. You have Shiv buffing Deathstalker. All of these things together actually give Deathstalker burst, which has been kind of lacking this expansion. And you have Bait and Switch, which makes evasion a great defensive tool. Okay, let's compare some breakdowns here. I'm going to delete some of these. So single target, Fatebound, single target, Deathstalker, and then Dungeonslice for the two of them in a bleed build. Okay, so Fatebound, right? We're playing. I'm gonna go over some gear stuff as well. I know I didn't talk about like the gear that drops. But obviously we want our tier. 5 pieces is fine. 4 pieces is fine. Reshi wraps, that's locked in. The boots that trigger the power of the Reshi wraps more frequently, that's locked in as well. Ascendance is locked in. The Writhing Banding, other embellishments, that's locked in. Then the off pieces I kind of already complained about in the gear section. These don't matter. It's just stats, get item level. As long as it has crit and mastery, you'll be fine. Whatever, who cares? Trinkets. This is where things get interesting. Because of Fatebound and single target, you need to play a 130 trinket So Lily of the Eternal Weave is the way to go. The other one, which is kind of really good, and I just pushed an update for in simulations, is Nether Prism. The Nether Prism trinket, which I might actually have on here. This guy. It's Spy Masters. So you get random stacks. When you use it, you consume the stacks to get big agility. This is worth using and holding for every 3 minutes, because Deathmark is going to be a minute 30 cooldown. So optimally, you would want to use this every 3 minutes with Vanish. If you just want to be lazy and macro it to Deathmark, that's fine too. It's about 0.5% worse. And obviously, if you don't have Nether Prism, you would just play Lily, which I don't have. And Lily is just macro to Deathmark every minute and a half, good to go. So those are kind of your two options. There's another trinket from Halls of Atonement. It's a crit trinket. That one kind of really blows. We don't really care for this. You have to channel it. It's awkward. You can't macro it. Just get a Lily. Like, if you're farming trinkets, just get a Lily instead. That's really all there is to it. Then for your second slot, you have Antenna. This is probably best in slot. None of the other raid trinkets are really all that great in that regard. You can play Pacemaker still. Those would kind of be the two options that you have for your second slot there. So that's Fatebound. The only thing that changes for Deathstalker is that you're on a 2-minute timer. So you will be playing Araz's Ritual Forge. This trinket is still crazy for 2-minute specs. So Araz's Ritual Forge, very good. Always play it on Deathstalker, and then again, your second trinket should be Antenna or Pacemaker. You can, of course, still play Signet if you want to. If you have a good Signet, you can play Nether Prism if you want to. You just macro it to Deathmark. You can also still play Lily of the Eternal Weave. You, again, just macro it to Deathmark. You hold it for 30 seconds just like you would House of Cards last tier. But the Ritual Forge is by far and away the best trinket. So those are your options there. Don't need to talk about gear too much because, again, off pieces don't matter. So trinkets matter, these don't matter. Ascendance, Writhing Band is locked in, Reshiwrap's locked in, Tier's locked in. Fatebound's Breakdown is interesting though, because you have Hand of Fate. This is all tails and a little bit of the lucky coin from the capstone, right? The 7 in a row. This is why Fatebound sucks in AoE, because you're doing 19% basically of your damage in single target with the coin, and then Delivered Doom, you're doing 30% less in AoE. So you just lose like 6% of your damage instantly, just for ads existing. There's also some trouble with Fate Intertwined where it doesn't hit the main target anymore, so it doesn't Caustic Spatter. It hits the off targets, so you lose this like 3% thing. It still does the damage to the off targets, but if it's spattered, it would be a lot better. Except it doesn't, because it doesn't hit the main target. All of these are issues. But coin flipping, this is passive, right? So big damage from the coin flips. Kingsbane, also big damage. This is again with 4-piece and everything equipped. So your Kingsbane is actually doing a considerable amount of damage. Then you have your Vicious Venoms cranking it up. And other than that, this is pretty straightforward, right? Like, you have melee attacks, whatever, it doesn't matter. Maintain. Deathmark here is combined, so this is a combination of all the poisons you're duplicating, all of the bleeds you're duplicating, and the Deathmark dot itself. All of that's pretty good. Not really much to it. I'm gonna be honest. You still have Poison Bomb, still have Fate, Intertwined, and Venom. You're just in Venom spamming, and as you're using 5 combo point finishers, you are flipping your Tails coin. Good to go. Let's compare that to Deathstalker, where you will see, side by side, Envenom is cranking. That is purely because of Darkest Night. Darkest Night is the reason why Envenom is skyrocketing here. That's also why it's better in Execute. Remember, Zoldyck doesn't work on the coins, but it would work on this massive Envenom, so that's a benefit. Mutilate, again, Vicious Venoms, cranking. Rupture, again, cranking. Your melee attacks are cranking because of Hunt Them Down. This is once again a Deathstalker thing. So just having uptime on bosses will do a significant amount of damage, and you'll see Kingsbane is really weak in comparison. 6.5 to 10. That is purely because of the Fatebound 2-piece, which is increasing Kingsbane damage and also increasing the duration. The duration is bugged as of right now, and it is bugged in Sims as well, so this number will go even higher when that gets fixed. And then aside from that, everything else is pretty normal. This is the damage from cycling your mark, right? Not really much to it there. Good to go, right? But you'll see it's much lower in single target. Very low. It's 10% worse. So playing this in single target is not only more difficult, it's also worse. Then we'll look at the comparison between Fatebound. I know this is named wrong. Fatebound and Deathstalker here. This is both with a bleed build. You'll see that because the Envenoms are so much bigger, even though this is the same build, playing Caustic Spatter on Deathstalker is just so much better. You get so much extra damage from Caustic Spatter. Here it's 13%, here it's 17%. It is so much more damage, and so on Fatebound, you'll get a lot of damage out of your bleeds, but your Tails coin is obviously bad, your Fate Intertwined is bad. These are the things that lose damage in like bigger AoE. So that all sucks pretty bad for Fatebound, and this is why you kind of don't want to play Fatebound in M+. Now, you can see the Sanguine Blade's damage. It meshes in with the dot itself. Logs doesn't do this. It splits Sanguine Blades out into its own thing. So that's why these numbers seem really high compared to Logs. But you'll see, you know, this Caustic Spatter damage, this Envenom damage, Singular Focus, this is single target funnel damage doing 7% of your overall. It is very strong, right? Like, the Tails coin, which is basically the entirety of the Fatebound tree, the entire hero talent, Tails flips themselves are 8%. And Singular Focus, this one minor talent, which is doing raw funnel damage, is 7%. It is bananas. It is bananas how good Fatebound is in AoE situations. Now, Fan of Knives, obviously you get Clear the Witnesses, which is giving you extra combo points as well, and extra damage. This Clear the Witnesses buff that you're getting on Fan of Knives is already doing way more than the Fate Intertwined buff for Envenom that Fatebound has. This is not close. This is a slaughter. That's what it is. Like, the comparison here between Deathstalker and Fatebound is a slaughter. It also generates more combo points. So you see 53 Envenoms, where here it's, well, similar actually. I'm eating my words as I speak. It's similar. Just keep in mind it's similar, but it could be better. In this case, I'm playing Follow the Blood. If I were to play with Momentum of Despair, I would get more crit. More crit would mean more Envenoms. So, slight thing on my part here. Talking too fast. But, again, the other option here is crit chance on Fan of Knives, which would get more combo points, which then would mean more Envenoms. Okay. And with that, that's my last slide. That's all I have. We clocked in just over 3 hours. It is 3 in the morning. Look at me go. Hopefully that explains everything. That's all I know about Assassination. Everything I know about Assassination from front to back, you've never played it before. Everything that I know. If I missed something, please check the comments. People will ask if I missed something. I will answer if I missed something. I'll try to pin it, whatever, but thinking that's it. Anyways, it's me again, this time without Maplestar music, in the eerie darkness. I had to fix some things. As I lose my voice, talking for 3 hours is very strenuous. I want to talk about my UI, why it tracks the things it does, how you can edit the UI to your liking. And we're going to start, I'm just going to as my voice goes. I'm sorry. I'm gonna do this as my voice goes because I can't deal with it anymore. We're gonna start with my Weakauras. So my Weakauras are down here. These are based off of Affinar's Weakauras, if you've ever used Affinar's Weakauras. And they track basically everything you would ever need. Now, there's a poison tracker at the top here, as well as some temporary buffs, mostly for Fatebound coins and Deathstalker timers. The middle here is like rotational things, and then you have cooldowns at the bottom. So that's sort of how that's set up. And then there's utility and cooldowns at the bottom for defensive things. Now, I want to go over some features that I have, for example, on my combo point bar. For example, if you are playing Deathstalker, I have the coloring for when to finish. That changes automatically. So as you can see here, 5+ combo points, good to go. 5+ combo points, good to go. And once you hit Darkest Nights, you need to go to 7. So I highlight the last one, you go to 7, everything resets, you're back to normal. I have been playing around with the colors on a lot of this stuff. So if you want to change the colors, let me show you how to do that. Now I need to get rid of... hold on, before I do that, this is going to mess me up quite a bit, as I will be explaining how to open Weakauras. I need to not have Bone Spike. So let me reset Bone Spike so that it doesn't keep me locked in combat, and then go from there. I'm just going to fly all the way out here. That should be more than enough. Okay, so in my package, you'll find everything for all of the respecs. This is specifically for Envenom tracking. So this is with Twist the Knife. This tracks both charges or both stacks of Envenom's buff. This isn't necessary, but I find that having the visual is a good indicator for Envenom stuff, and I think it's just generally a good thing to track. Now, you'll also see this red bar on the side of my Weakauras. This red bar is specifically for Carnage, but you can also use it as an improved Garrote tracker or a Master Assassin tracker. They all have the same duration. So if you're playing Bleed build, this is all your stealth effects. Okay, so let's say you want to change the colors on the combo points. So that's under Resources and Combo Points. Now, you can do this via the entire group. If you just go to Conditions, there's a lot of colors here that you can change. This first red color, this is obviously the color of the combo points. So changing this, you would need to change the start and end. You can change that to whatever you want for the baseline color. If you want to, you can then also change this bar gradients. This is the green color for when you're able to finish without Darkest Night. So changing this and this one here, these three, this is for 5, 6, and 7 combo points. You can change those. If you want to have the combo points just have the same color, you can copy paste this. So for example, you can copy this color and then move it over here like so. Or you can just delete this entirely if you don't want that indicator on 5+ combo points if you can finish. That is also perfectly fine. So the green ones you can delete if you don't want that. Then for the indicator on... sorry. I swallowed wrong. Okay. Yikes. For the purple on Darkest Night, you can change this one. This is the thick center of the combo point. There is also, however, a glow indicator. For that, you need to go to combo point 7, display, And then the glow here, you can change the color, as well as border 2. Yeah, border 2. You can turn that to a different color or turn it off if you don't like the glow. If you don't like any of this stuff, you can turn that off or turn the border size down, which however you feel. That's how you would edit all of that. Combo point 7 also obviously has the conditions for this. So if you want to change Darkest Night tracking, you go to combo point 7. Otherwise, you can just do it via the entire condition here and change the red and the green. So that's how you change the combo points. If you want to change the color of the energy, that's also easy because there is a gradient start, gradient end, and background color. So that would literally just, there we go. That would change, obviously, the left, the right, and the background. So if you would like to do a gradient as you get higher up on energy, you can do that. For example, red means use energy. Now you have a gradient from the lowest to the highest. You have the background color that you can change, of course, if you want. If you don't want it to be brown, you can make it translucent. You can remove the alpha. It's just a color picker. So you can do that however you want. I'm going to just keep it yellow. Now, some people have asked how to raise and lower things, like how to make the combo points skinnier or thicker. That is done under this dynamic group. I haven't set up a custom option for this, but changing it shouldn't be difficult. So if you go to the custom grow here, you hit expand. There's the spacing between combo points here, so you can make this 5, and now the combo points have a bigger spacing between them. If you want to change the height, you can change it via here. So you can do 4, for example. Now they're super skinny. And you'd have to move them down via the position settings so you can line them back up. If you're playing on a monitor that's very wide, like an ultra wide or something, you can also change the bar width here. So you can do, instead of 249.5, I do that to line up the edges. But you can do like, ultra wide, maybe you do 600. Now you have super wide combo point bar. All that kind of stuff you can change from these settings here. Don't change any of this stuff below. All of this stuff that I've highlighted is required in order to make the bars resize with additional combo points. So don't touch any of that, just touch the top 3 stuff here. The same thing you can do for energy, except that this is a simple progress bar, so you can change the width and the height automatically here in the position settings. And the same thing with the cast bar that is at the bottom here. You can change that as well. Some other stuff, in case you wanted to change where things are, these are all dynamic groups. So you have this dynamic group here with all of these buffs. So you have things like Trickster Flawless Form. You have the the rolls from Roll of Bones, Between the Eyes procs, all of these things, finality buffs, the coins from Fatebound, the Deathstalker stuff, find weakness. That's all in this top bar. If you want to prioritize something, you can simply move it into a different folder. So in this case, for example, let's say Darkest Night, I want it to be a core functionality. So now it's added onto this middle bar here. And whenever Darkest Night procs, what it'll end up happening is it'll push everything else out of the way. Like so. Now this is very jarring and things will move over, and the Envenom tracker here will not move over because it's not a part of the group. So if you're going to do something like this that jostles the whole thing and moves everything all together, you need to be very aware that the Twist the Knife tracker will not go with it. So that is something that you will need to delete or have a workaround for. But that is something you can do, especially on other specs that don't have that special case of Twist the Knife changing. Then The same thing you can do with obviously this bottom stuff here. I've had people ask me how to delete this bottom. This is all the rogue utility stuff. So if you don't want to track, say, like trinkets, cooldowns, kidney shot, blind, any of the utility cooldowns, if you don't want to track the potions or any of that sort, you can just simply delete this whole group and it'll all go away. Or you can delete the individual things that you don't like. I've also had people say that the alpha is weird. The alpha is, I believe, handled via a condition. This is a little bit weird, because I'm not entirely sure. I haven't checked this in a while, so my apologies for not knowing better. Now, I believe that the alpha is 1 when things are active, such as the sprint here. But the blind visibility, for example, is handled from this extra option window. So the alpha here is set baseline to 30, and then the alpha is set to 1 if it's active. So if you don't like that and you want the alpha to always be true on something, you would need to go and change this to 100, and that'll make it always active. So you'll see here that it's fully colored in. That's how you would change that. That's about it for the Weakauras. I also want to talk about my plater. Now, my plater setup is based entirely around Jundies plater. So all of the all of the NPC colors, these are all Jundies colors. I've tried my best to make the nameplates color for tracking Deathstalker's Mark, Caustic, and both. I've tried my best to make them as colorblind friendly as possible. It is very difficult because the colors that Jundies plater uses, as well as other mods like Quasi's plater and all that stuff, they use a lot of different colors, and it makes it difficult to find colors that are both unique and stand out in the crowd in order to track certain buffs, such as Caustic Spatter, that are also colorblind friendly. Sorry, colorblind friendly. If you have problems seeing it, so for example, for Deathstalker here, I have the mark set as white. Dummies are also white, but in normal gameplay, the dummies here would, for example, be yellow, and most mobs will be yellow. So if you get the mark on, I don't track it on the nameplates, but they will be a bright white in comparison to all the other mods. If you then apply Caustic Spatter, it turns into this brown, which will also stand out amongst all the other mods. So this is Caustic Spatter and Deathstalker's Mark. If you don't have Deathstalker's Mark on the target, it turns into a green. This green for Caustic Spatter, and then once you apply Deathstalker's Mark again, you go back to brown. Now, the only things that I track on my nameplate, because of the coloring that I do for Deathstalker's Mark and Caustic Spatter, is I only track Garrote and Rupture. Now, there are built-in pandemic timers for this, so as you see the timer go down, it will highlight with a pandemic timer. This does not take your combo points into consideration, so keep that in mind. But it should serve as a general enough use case for you to get alerted about your pandemic timer. So if you want to change any of that, oh, I should also mention, for Crimson Tempest, I do track Crimson Tempest on my nameplates. Not as a debuff, though, next to Garrote and Rupture. I only want to track Garrote and Rupture on the nameplates. So the way I track Crimson Tempest is I make the border red. This, in my opinion, stands out enough to where if new mobs walk in that don't have it, they are separate enough for me to notice and reapply. But it's not invasive enough for me to care, because obviously if you're standing in a pack and you press Crimson Tempest, the timer is all the same as the mob you have selected, so you could just track it by a Weakauras. But in the off situation where like these two have it and these two don't, I can see from the red border that there are mobs missing. I'm also tracking the amount of targets hit from Crimson Tempest. So I can refresh it here, hit 4 targets, see that they all have the border, and then track the timer using the Weakauras here. Okay, so with that, let me tell you how to change some stuff on the plater. These are mostly found under the modding sections. Now, there are certain things like the priority-based scaling here. If you have a... Yeah, here, there's even stuff that Jundies included. So you can read this, but you can basically change the nameplate size of mobs as you see fit. Now, there are dungeons preset up here. So Fiendish Souls and Sepulchre, for example. These are raids. Dungeons are below at the bottom, so there's Shadowlands dungeons here. With Halls of Atonements, these are already set up. Right, for the upcoming raid, Tazavesh, or upcoming season, Tazavesh is in here as well, I believe. Let me just find it. Tazavesh here. The Merkbrine Shoe Runners, these are the Murlocs at the start of Gambit. These are set to small because they're unimportant mobs. Then you have stuff that's medium and extra small. These are actually unimportant mobs. If you have a mob that you want to add, I would suggest keeping it organized like this. And the way that you would add it is, for example, if I wanted to make this training dummy small, I have any add-on like ID tip, for example. You can see the NPC ID is 153285. So I could add that here. 153285. Equals small. And if I hit save, you'll see the nameplates instantly get smaller. Now I can also make these medium. They get bigger. And I believe the wording here is large, very large, extra large. Let me check. Larger. Okay, well, there's no extra. It's only extra small. But that is how you would change that. Now, the thing to note about this is that changing the size of the nameplate does not change the interactable size. So if I were to come and hover in here, you see how the target is highlighting before I actually hit the nameplate? That is because the box that is interactable with your cursor is the same size no matter how you resize the nameplates. There's no way to change this interactable size. So it is just simply bigger. So if you use nameplates as clicks and you think changing the size of the nameplate will help you click better, it won't. The click size is the exact same. However, what it will do is it will add visual clarity. By making the dummies, for example, smaller, you can see other nameplates more effectively. So keep that in mind. All the other stuff is able to be found either in nameplate color or NPC colors here. These are Jundies colors. I wouldn't touch these, but if you want to use Quasi's colors, for example, instead, you can import and export these. So you can export these, get Jundies colors, import them to a different profile. Or if you have Quasi's nameplate and you prefer Quasi's colors, you could export it from Quasi's and import it here. And all of the colors would just automatically override. If you want to track some other stuff on the nameplate, I'm only tracking Garrote and Rupture. But let's say you play Subtlety or you play Outlaw and you really want to see a debuff, you can add it here by using the name. Or if you want to track, for example, Caustic Spatter, you can just add it like this and it will go into manual tracking. This will block all other debuffs. So if there are things that you want to see, make sure that you add them beforehand, or you set the tracking to automatic and then do a blacklist here. I already have blacklisted all of the stuff that I find to be unimpactful. So the stuff like the Garrote Silence, Find Weakness, Doomblade, Caustic Spatter, Crimson Tempest, the Poisons, Deathmark, all of that is already removed here in the automatic tracking. But there are some stuff that will inevitably be missing. For example, I'm not updating this for Season 3, so all of the trinket debuffs, for example, would show up here, along with any debuffs that come from, say, tier set bonuses or other sources, such as the raid fight itself. So keep that in mind. I have this set to manual. This makes it so that I'm only tracking Garrote and Rupture. So you have the choice there of either tracking it via adding the debuff that you want to track, or tracking it automatically and blacklisting the debuffs that you don't want to see. Okay. You can also export the buffs and debuffs here from your own manual tracking. So just make sure, if you're going to use this profile and you want to track some stuff, but you have this set up, you can export it and then import it in. So that's useful there. Everything else is based entirely on these mods. There are scripts here. These are all Jundies. I don't touch these, except for the Garrote and Rupture Pandemic glows here. These are important for those big yellow borders. If you want to change it, there's a constructor here. If you go under the constructor, you can change the number of lines, the frequency, the length, the thickness. So all of this stuff, if you want to change that, go for it. You can change how it visually looks. You can also change the color of it, for example. I have these set to be equivalent, but for example, if you wanted to change the Pandemic glow on Rupture to red, you could simply type red and it would change the color. Then the main beef of this is under mods. So we already went over the priority-based scaling. We then also have an enhanced cast bar from Jundies. This is for important casts. I did not touch this. This is baseline Jundies. Then we have recolor for debuffs. I believe this is updated. If it's not updated, I will make sure to update it early on in the season. There's some stuff that I need to double check. So keep that in mind. Some of this might not work entirely properly, and I will be pulling stuff out of Jundies to update it. The NPC colors I know are for sure updated, but some of the mod stuff is a little bit tricky. Anyways, recolor for debuffs. This is the one that I edited in order to make work with Caustic Spatter, the Mark and Caustic, Deathstalker's Mark. I also included phased Crimson, the border for Crimson Tempest, and the Deathmark glow. So when you hit a target with Deathmark, it does this glow, so it doubly highlights when you have Deathmark and AoE. Now, if you want to change that, I have it set up so that you can just change it from here. However, you can also add some other stuff. So I have logic set up here. If you're aware of how to code, you can change this and add certain things that you want to track. I'm leaving that as an exercise to the reader. The code is not that difficult. You can also, of course, change the constructor here. This is, again, the number of lines, the frequency, the length. This is the visual. And I named it stuff because it was, you know, my code and it was not working, so I got angry at it. But again, these numbers just change the visuals, and then you can always go back to options and simply change the colors as you see fit. So if for some reason you are colorblind and it doesn't work the way you want it to, you're having trouble seeing things, or if you change the colors in the NPC colors and names to something like Quasi and the colors are now clashing, you can always go in here and change the colors manually. For Spatter, the Mark and Caustic. Phased, this is for Trickster. On Subtlety and Outlaw, I have it set to the same as Caustic Spatter because it works that way for my brain. But obviously, if you want to make this like a light blue, you can do that, right? You can just change that to whatever you want. The other thing you could do is you can make it completely invisible. So if you make it 0 alpha and then hit save, now there would be no Crimson Tempest border. So here you would see no border anymore. The other thing that you probably saw is as I walked away and opened Plater, the border for Deathmark was still present and going. I believe this is a bug with how Plater works, because the nameplate isn't updating. This isn't a problem in raid combat, but it can be a problem on some wipes. And it is a problem, for example, on this dummy right now, because it seems like it has infinite Deathmark, but once the nameplate gets updated in any way, so like if damage gets dealt to it by you, the nameplate will update, and then therefore it'll get removed. So if I just go up in Fan of Knives, the nameplate updates, and the border is gone. I believe this is a performance optimization that Plater has made, but I'm not sure. It could just be a bug that I have not been able to fix. So keep that in mind. I'm just going to go over some other general settings. So if you want to change how things look like, you can go to the enemy NPC. There's a lot of settings here for visual, what to change visually if you want to change the height, the width. And then there's a lot of stuff that you can change under advanced here. If the update interval, I have it set to maximum. This is again a performance optimization to get maximum frames out of your plater. If you change this down to 0.5, your plater is going to look a lot snappier and update a lot more often. But if this updates at 0.05, for example, it's updating 10 times as frequently as a maximum update interval. I personally can't really notice a difference, or I've gotten too used to being at 0.5, but this also saves you the most amount of frame rate. So keep that in mind if you were to ever change that. It also has additions of showing unit types. I hide all of the friendly stuff because I'm a rogue and I don't care about my friends. If you want to change like fonts and stuff, it's also in here. There's also some offsets. But again, this is all advanced stuff. The real deal here is the update interval. If it seems sluggish to update, you can use that. Otherwise, I believe that's about it for the plater. Those are the only two add-ons I use, really. I have details and obviously all of the like big wigs and all of the usual stuff. This is on PTR, so it doesn't have a full thing. But RC Loot Council, you know, all of the usual things that's going on. But I try to keep it fairly lightweight. Like right now, I'm getting 170, 220 FPS. Standing in Orgrimmar, obviously it's not busy here, but I am also recording using my CPU, and I am running a Minecraft server, so that is eating my RAM and stuff. So I'm not doing nothing on this PC. And I get pretty good frame rate, so I don't know. It works for me. That might not necessarily work for you. If you care about my layout here, I can also include this. I believe I have it set up better on live, so I will be using the live version. I don't think I upload that anywhere, but if there's enough interest, I can. It's just a very simple base UI setup. I just moved some stuff around. It's not that impressive. It's fairly standard stuff. Smash the buttons into the bottom right. Nothing really to it. Edit mode is very good. The base UI does what it needs to. I don't really care all that much. Anyways, with that, it is now 4 in the morning. And my voice is obviously not surviving. I don't think I'm ever doing a video like this again. This is way too long. But for those of you who stuck around, thank you. And I hope it helped. I hope you learned a lot of things. And it is my pleasure to be your community figure. Have a good night, everyone. Bye.